Tonight, the bells of a forgotten monastery echo softly through a valley wrapped in mist, and a secret long buried begins to stir. This is a story of quiet halls, candlelit prayers, and a boy who believes his world is small until the past gently reaches out to claim him. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. If you enjoy slow, soothing stories like this one, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let me know where you're listening from. Perhaps it's late evening in the US, early morning in Europe, or a calm midnight hour in Canada, or somewhere else in the world, and what time the story is keeping you company. Now, soften your breath, relax your shoulders, and allow the noise of the day to fade. When you're ready, let us return quietly to the story. The boy woke before the bell, as he always did, long before sunlight touched the stone walls of the monastery. He lay still on his narrow cot, listening to the familiar hush of the mountains beyond the cloister. The air was cool, scented faintly with old parchment, beeswax candles, and the clean mineral smell of morning dew. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called once, then fell silent again, as if respecting the sacred quiet of the hour. His name was Eleazar, so he believed. It was the name the monks had given him when he was small enough to be carried in a single pair of arms. To him, the monastery was the whole world. Grey stone corridors worn smooth by centuries of sandaled feet, arched windows that caught the light like patient eyes, and a garden where herbs grew in careful rows, whispering when the wind passed through them. Elias rose slowly, folding his blanket with the care Brother Mati had taught him. Every movement was deliberate, unhurried, as if the calm of the place had settled into his bones. He washed his face in the cold basin water, blinking away the last traces of sleep, and dressed in the simple robe that marked him as a novice. No symbols, no ornament, only humility stitched into coarse fabric. As he stepped into the corridor, the monastery breathed around him. Candles flickered in their niches, casting gentle shadows that danced along the walls. Elias walked barefoot, the chill of stone grounding him, guiding him toward the chapel where the monks would soon gather. He felt safe here, sheltered, loved, in the quiet, measured way the brothers offered affection through lessons, shared silence, and steady presence. Yet, as dawn approached, an unfamiliar feeling stirred beneath his calm, a restlessness, soft but persistent, like a distant drumbeat heard through layers of fog. Elias paused at one of the high windows and looked out across the valley. The sky was beginning to pale, shades of silver and blue unfolding slowly, patiently. He did not know why, but his heart tightened as he watched the horizon, as though something beyond those mountains was watching him in return. The bell finally rang, low and resonant, filling the monastery with sound. Elias inhaled deeply and turned toward the chapel, unaware that this morning, so like all the others, was quietly different. Somewhere within these walls, truths older than the stone itself were waiting, and the life he knew was already beginning to shift, one breath at a time. The chapel filled slowly, robes whispering against stone as the monks took their places in the long wooden pews. Elias slipped into his usual spot near the back, hands folded, spine straight, his breathing matching the slow rhythm he had practiced since childhood. Candlelight warmed the space, turning the rough walls golden, softening every edge. Brother Anselm began the morning prayer in a voice worn smooth by years of repetition. The words rose and fell like a gentle tide, familiar enough that Elias barely had to think about them. Instead, he let them pass through him, settling somewhere deeper than thought. Silence followed each verse, wide and welcoming, as if the world itself were listening. After prayers, the monks moved in unspoken order toward their daily tasks. Elias followed Brother Matai into the scriptorium, a long room lined with desks and shelves heavy with ancient books. The air here was warmer, scented with ink and old leather. Sunlight streamed through narrow windows, falling in pale bands across the floor. Elias loved this place. He loved the scratch of quill on parchment, the careful shaping of letters, the way time seemed to slow until each moment felt complete in itself. Brother Matai showed him how to copy a passage from a weathered manuscript, guiding his hand when the curves grew uncertain. "Patience," the old monk murmured, his voice as calm as still water. "Every letter must be given its full breath." Elias nodded, focusing again. Yet even here, in this room of quiet devotion, the restlessness returned. His thoughts drifted to the valley beyond the walls, to roads he had never walked, and cities he had only read about in faded texts. He had always assumed curiosity was simply part of learning, but today it felt heavier, as though the questions carried weight he could not yet lift. At midday, they ate in silence bread, still warm from the ovens, thin soup fragrant with herbs from the garden. Elias noticed the way the older monks watched him with gentle eyes, expressions softening when he smiled. He did not see the shared glances, the unspoken concern that passed between them. When the afternoon light grew long and amber, Brother Matai asked Elias to walk with him in the cloister garden. They moved slowly between rows of rosemary and thyme, bees humming lazily nearby. The old monk rested his hands on his staff and looked at the boy as though measuring time itself. "Elias," he said at last, "have you ever wondered why you came to us?" The question settled into the air, heavy and tender. Elias opened his mouth to answer, then hesitated. He had always believed the monastery was his beginning, yet now, with the sun warming his face and the valley stretching endlessly beyond the walls, he realized he did not truly know. The garden seemed to grow quieter after Brother Matai spoke, as if the leaves themselves were listening. Elias felt the warmth of the sun on his skin, yet a faint chill moved through him, beginning somewhere deep in his chest. He searched the old monk's face for an answer that had not yet been given, but Brother Matai only smiled gently and gestured for them to continue walking. "I have wondered," Elias said at last, his voice low and careful, shaped by years of silence, "but I thought it did not matter. This is my home." Brother Matai nodded, his steps slow and measured. "And it has been," he replied, "in every way that matters to the heart." He paused beside a small stone fountain where water trickled endlessly, worn smooth by time. Yet even still, water remembers the mountain it came from. They stood together, listening to the quiet sound. Elias watched the ripples spread and fade, his reflection breaking apart and reforming again. A strange feeling rose within him, familiar, though he could not name it, like recognizing a melody he had never consciously learned. Brother Matai spoke again, softer now. "You arrived here on a night much like this morning, cool, misty, and very still. You were small, wrapped in fine cloth, and you did not cry. You simply watched, as though you understood more than you should have." Elias swallowed. He had no memories of such a night, only dreams, flashes of torchlight, the echo of distant voices, the sense of movement through darkness. He had always assumed they were fragments borrowed from the stories the monks read aloud in winter. "Who brought me?" he asked. The old monk's fingers tightened briefly around his staff. "Someone who loved you enough to let you go." The answer was gentle, but it carried a quiet ache. Elias felt it settle into him, not as fear, but as a widening, like a door opening inward. He realized, then, that the monastery had not erased his past. It had protected him from it, holding the truth patiently until he was ready to hear its shape. A breeze moved through the garden, carrying the scent of pine from the mountains. Brother Matai placed a hand on Elias's shoulder, warm and steady. "There will come a time," he said, "when you must decide how much of the world you wish to carry with you." Elias nodded slowly, his gaze drifting once more to the distant hills. For the first time, they did not seem like boundaries. They seemed like an invitation, waiting quietly for him to choose. That evening, Elias found it difficult to sleep. The monastery settled into its familiar nighttime hush, the soft closing of doors, the final murmured prayers, the long sigh of wind slipping through the high eaves. But his thoughts continued to wander. He lay on his cot, hands folded over his chest, watching moonlight paint pale shapes across the ceiling. The words of Brother Matai returned again and again, gentle yet insistent. "Someone who loved you enough to let you go." Elias repeated the phrase silently, letting it settle. It did not frighten him. Instead, it stirred a quiet curiosity, like a lantern being lit in a darkened room. Sometime after midnight, when the bell had long since marked the hour of rest, Elias heard something unusual. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, and careful not to disturb the sleeping halls. He sat up, listening. The sound passed his door, paused, then continued toward the far end of the corridor, the direction of the old council chamber, rarely used now except for storage and memory. Elias hesitated. The monks taught obedience, patience, trust in silence. Yet tonight, another lesson seemed to rise within him, attentiveness. He slipped from his bed and followed the sound, moving as quietly as the shadows. The stone floor was cold beneath his feet, grounding him as he reached the corridor's end. A thin line of candlelight spilled from beneath the council chamber door. Voices murmured inside, low, familiar. Elias recognized Brother Anselm's steady tone, and beside it, the softer cadence of Brother Matai. He did not mean to listen, but the words carried, wrapping themselves around him like the night air. "The signs are returning," Brother Anselm said. "He feels it now. They always do." "And the seal?" another voice asked. "It remains hidden," Mati replied, "but secrets grow restless, just as children do." Elias stepped back, heart beating slowly but firmly. He did not understand the meaning, only the weight of it. Whatever they were discussing, it involved him, and it was older than his memories. He returned to his room before the footsteps moved again. Closing his door with care, lying back on his cot, he stared into the darkness, no longer empty, but full of questions, of possibilities, of a life that might stretch far beyond stone walls and prayer bells. Outside, the moon climbed higher, patient and watchful, and within Elias, something ancient and quiet stirred, not demanding, only waiting. Morning arrived gently, as if the night wished to apologize for its secrets. Pale light crept into Elias's chamber, settling on the edges of his blanket and the smooth stone floor. He woke with the echo of whispered voices still lingering in his mind, not sharp or alarming, but steady like a truth that had decided to stay. As he dressed, his fingers brushed against his collarbone, and he paused. There, beneath the simple robe he had worn all his life, was something he rarely thought about, a faint mark on his skin. It was small, no larger than a coin, shaped almost like a star or a flower, with too many petals. The monks had once told him it was a birthmark, nothing more. Today, it felt different. Elias studied it in the muted light, tracing its edges with gentle curiosity. It did not hurt, it never had. Yet, as he touched it, a warmth spread outward, subtle but unmistakable, like embers stirred by breath. He let his hand fall, unsettled but calm, trusting the stillness he had been taught. The day's work carried on as usual. Lessons in the scriptorium, careful copying of illuminated letters, the soft rasp of parchment beneath his hand. But Elias noticed changes in himself. The words seemed to come more easily. Passages he had struggled to remember before now settled into his thoughts as though they had always belonged there. During the midday meal, Brother Anselm watched him over the rim of his bowl, eyes thoughtful. When their gazes met, the elder monk inclined his head slightly, a gesture so small it might have gone unnoticed by anyone else. Elias felt a quiet reassurance in it, as though he had passed some unspoken test. In the afternoon, the brothers gathered for instruction in the chapel. Brother Matthias spoke of stewardship, of leadership as service rather than command. His voice carried through the space, calm and measured, yet Elias sensed an undercurrent, a lesson shaped for him alone. True authority, Matthias said, is not taken. It is accepted, often reluctantly, by those who understand its weight. The words settled deep within Elias, resonating with the warmth beneath his robe. He did not yet know why they mattered, only that they did. That evening, as the sun lowered itself behind the mountains, Brother Matthias asked Elias to remain behind after prayers. The chapel emptied, footsteps fading into silence. Candles flickered, and the world felt very still. Elias, the old monk, said softly, "There are things you must soon be told." Elias met his gaze, steady and open. He felt no fear, only the calm awareness that a door long closed was finally beginning to open. The chapel doors closed with a muted echo, sealing Elias and Brother Matthias inside the warm glow of candlelight. The air felt thicker somehow, not heavy, but full, like a room filled with breath being held. Elias stood quietly, hands folded, as he had been taught, waiting without urgency. Brother Matthias turned and walked toward the far wall, where a faded tapestry hung. Its colors had softened with age, threads of gold dulled to honey, blues faded into mist. With careful hands, he lifted the edge of the fabric, revealing a narrow wooden door Elias had never noticed before. They stepped into a small chamber lit by a single oil lamp. Shelves lined the walls, holding scrolls and books wrapped in cloth, their presence solemn and patient. The scent here was deeper than in the scriptorium: old ink, dust, and something else Elias could not name, something like memory itself. From one shelf, Brother Matthias took down a slim volume bound in dark leather. He placed it on the table between them, but did not open it at once. Instead, he rested his palms upon the cover, eyes closed, as though offering a silent prayer. "This is not a holy text," he said at last, "but it has been guarded as carefully as one." He opened the book. Inside, the writing was precise and formal, the script of royal chroniclers rather than monks. Margins bore seals pressed in faded wax, symbols Elias recognized from illustrations in history texts: crowns, lions, interwoven stars. Brother Matthias turned a page, then another, until he stopped and angled the book toward Elias. "Read the name," he said. Elias leaned closer. The letters were clear, steady. Prince Alaric of the House of Veron. The name struck him like a bell heard from very far away. He did not recoil. He did not gasp. Instead, something within him grew very still, as though listening. This chronicle records a child taken from the capital during a time of upheaval. Matthias continued softly. A child hidden where power could not reach. Hidden here. Elias looked up, eyes calm but searching. "You are saying the child was me?" "Yes," the monk replied. "You were born a prince." The words settled into the room without sound, without violence. Elias felt no rush of grand visions, no sudden hunger for crowns or banners. What he felt was recognition, the gentle fitting together of pieces that had always been near, waiting. Brother Matthias closed the book. "We did not raise you to forget who you are," he said. "We raised you to survive it." The lamp flickered, shadows moving slowly along the walls. Elias breathed in, then out, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart. He was still the boy of the monastery, yet now he knew he was also something Mara. Truth carried quietly, like a flame shielded from the wind. The name lingered in Ilias's thoughts long after the hidden chamber had grown quiet again. Alaric. It felt unfamiliar on his tongue, yet not unwelcome-like, a word remembered rather than learned. As he walked back through the candlelit corridors, the monastery seemed unchanged, and yet everything felt subtly different, as though the walls themselves had leaned closer to listen. That night, Elias slept more deeply than he expected. His dreams were calm. Slow moving, he saw wide halls with tall windows and banners stirring gently in warm air. He heard laughter echoing across stone floors, not loud or commanding, but kind. No faces were clear, no commands given, only a sense of belonging that drifted through him like a lullaby. At dawn, he woke with the name still present, resting quietly beside his own. Ilias Alaric. Two truths, neither in conflict, both breathing together. Over the following days, the monks treated him no differently, and yet he noticed small changes. Brother Anselm invited his thoughts more often during lessons. Brother Matthias spoke to him not only as a student, but as one being prepared, though, for what Elias did not yet ask. He listened, absorbed, and reflected, as he always had. In the evenings, Elias returned to the garden alone. He sat beside the fountain, watching water slip endlessly over stone, thinking of rivers that flowed beyond the valley, through towns and fields he had never seen. The thought did not pull at him with urgency. It simply waited, patient as the current. One afternoon, Brother Matthias joined him, lowering himself onto the bench with a quiet sigh. "A name can be a burden," the monk said, gazing at the water, "or it can be a promise. Elias considered this, which is mine." That Matthias replied with a small smile, "Depends on how you carry it." The answer felt right. Elias understood then that the crown he had been born into was not calling him with urgency or command. It was offering him a choice, one shaped not by destiny alone, but by the life of silence, discipline, and kindness he had already lived. As the sun dipped low and the garden filled with amber light, Elias felt himself standing at the edge of two worlds, neither demanding his immediate step. For now, there was time to learn, to breathe, to let the truth settle gently into place. And so he waited, calm and awake. As the path ahead slowly began to reveal itself, the monastery bell rang at midday, its deep voice rolling across the valley like a slow breath. Elias stood in the courtyard when the sound reached him, sunlight warming the stone beneath his feet. He paused, hands still, feeling the vibration settle in his chest. Today, the bell felt less like a call to prayer and more like a signal, quiet, deliberate, and meant especially for him. Shortly after the meal, a visitor arrived. Elias noticed the change before he saw the cause. The brothers moved with a subtle alertness, their calm unbroken but focused, like reeds bending together in a single current. At the gate stood a lone rider, cloak dusted with the pale grey of the road, hoarse, patient, and still. The man dismounted slowly, removing his hood with care. He did not look like a soldier. There was no armor, no banner, yet something in his posture spoke of discipline learned elsewhere, perhaps in courts rather than cloisters. Brother Anselm greeted him with a bow, not deep but respectful, and guided him inside. Elias was asked to wait in the garden. He sat on the familiar bench, listening to the wind move through the herbs. Time passed gently, bees hummed, water trickled, and still, beneath the calm, that quiet restlessness stirred again, more awake now. as if recognizing a footstep it had been listening for all along. At last, Brother Matai appeared at the garden arch. His face was composed, but his eyes held a new gravity. "Elias," he said, "there is someone who has traveled far to see you." The boy rose, smoothing his robe, heart steady. "Why?" Matai's gaze softened. "Because the world beyond these walls has begun to remember you." They walked together through the cloister halls, footsteps echoing softly. In the small receiving chamber, the visitor stood and inclined his head. When his eyes met Elias's, something unspoken passed between them, recognition, careful and restrained. "I bring no commands," the man said quietly, "only news." And an invitation. Elias listened, calm and attentive, feeling the shape of his life gently stretching outward once more. The monastery had not released him yet, but beyond its walls a path was forming, and it was beginning, very patiently, to call his name. The visitor waited until the door was closed and the room settled back into stillness. Light from the narrow window traced a soft line across the floor, stopping just short of Elias's feet. The man placed a small leather satchel on the table between them, as if setting down something heavier than its size suggested. "My name is Corvin," he said, his voice even practiced in restraint. "I served your father." The words were spoken without ceremony, without expectation. Elias felt them land gently, like a leaf touching water. He did not rush to respond. Silence, he had learned, was not emptiness. It was space enough for truth to breathe. Corvin opened the satchel and withdrew a folded cloth. When he spread it carefully on the table, a signet ring rolled into view, its metal dulled with age, but unmistakably fine. Etched upon it was the same interwoven star Elias had traced on his own skin so many times without knowing why. Brother Matai drew a slow breath. Elias felt warmth bloom beneath his robe again, steady and familiar. "This ring was meant for you," Corvin continued. "Not as a crown, not yet. As proof that you were not forgotten." Elias reached out and touched the ring. It was cool, solid, real. He felt no sudden rush of ambition, only a deepening sense of connection, like finding a missing word in a sentence he had been quietly living. "The kingdom is not at peace," Corvin said, "but it is not broken either. Many still remember the promise your family represented. They wait not for a ruler who conquers, but for one who listens." Elias looked up. "Why? Tell me now." Corvin met his gaze steadily. "Because you are no longer a child, and because the choice must be yours." Brother Matai rested a hand lightly on Elias's shoulder. The room felt balanced, held between past and future. Elias understood then that his life had not been paused within the monasteriate, had been prepared. He closed his fingers around the ring, feeling its weight, its patience. Beyond the walls, the world stirred. Within them, a boy breathed calmly, carrying two names, one heart, and a future that was slowly, gently beginning to unfold. That night, Elias did not return the ring to the satchel. Instead, he placed it beside his cot, where moonlight could touch it. The metal caught the pale glow, reflecting it softly onto the stone wall, as if the past itself were keeping watch. Sleep came, but lightly. Elias drifted in and out of rest, his breathing slow, his thoughts unhurried. He did not wrestle with the choice before him. The monks had taught him that clarity did not come through force, but through patience, and so he allowed the question to exist without answer. In the quiet hours, memories surfaced, small, ordinary ones. Learning to read by candlelight, carrying water from the well with Brother Thomas, laughing when they spilled more than they saved. Winter nights when snow pressed close to the windows and stories warmed the hall more than the fire ever could. These were not things to abandon. They were roots, Toward dawn, Elias rose and wrapped a cloak around his shoulders. He stepped outside into the courtyard. The air was cold and clean, stars fading slowly as the sky softened toward blue. He stood still, feeling the stone beneath his feet, the vast calm of the valley breathing around him. He thought of the word stewardship, of leadership as service, of a crown not as a prize, but as a responsibility accepted quietly. When the bell rang for morning prayers, Elias was already awake within himself. After the service, he sought Brother Mattai in the garden. The old monk looked up from tending the herbs, eyes kind and knowing, as if he had been expecting him all along. "I don't know when," Elias said, "or how." Mattai nodded. "You are not meant to. But I know," Elias continued, his voice steady, "that I cannot pretend the world beyond these walls does not exist." Brother Matisse smiled, slow and gentle. "Then you have learned the final lesson we hoped to teach you." They stood together as the sun climbed higher, warming the leaves, the stone, the quiet space between them. No departure was set, no banners unfurled. Only an understanding formed clear.com and unhurried. When the time came, Elias would walk beyond the gate, and when he did, he would carry the monastery with him, not as a memory, but as a way of being. The morning was crisp as Elias approached the monastery gate. Sunlight spilled over the stone walls, touching the courtyard with warmth, and the valley stretched wide and open beyond the gates. He carried only a small satchel, the signet ring resting securely inside, and a calm sense of purpose that had taken root over years of quiet discipline. Brother Mati walked beside him, keeping pace without speaking. The old monk's presence was steady, like a lighthouse guiding a ship through fog. Elias felt neither fear nor haste, only the gentle acknowledgement that something new was beginning. The gates opened slowly, creaking with the patience of centuries. Beyond them, the road wound down into the valley, lined with trees that swayed softly in the breeze. Birds moved in lazy arcs above, their calls faint and distant, as if welcoming him into the wider world. Corvin waited at the base of the hill, horse saddled and steady. He inclined his head when Elias approached. "Shall we begin?" he asked quietly. Elias nodded. The word Alaric whispered in his mind, steady and certain. "Yes, let us begin." The first steps down the path were deliberate. Stones pressed against his feet, grass brushed his robes, and the valley opened wider with each pace. Sounds of the monastery bells chanting, quiet footfalls grew softer behind him, blending into memory. Ahead, the road stretched toward hills kissed with early sunlight, and a world of possibility unfolded like a map he had only glimpsed in the pages of books. Corvin led the way, speaking occasionally of towns they would pass, rivers they would cross, and distant forests where shadows could be long but safe. Elias listened, absorbing each detail, not overwhelmed but attentive, as though every word added a layer to the life he was just beginning to inhabit. By midday, the monastery was no longer visible, swallowed by the curve of the valley and the soft rise of distant hills. Elias felt a subtle thrill, not of power or conquest, but of belonging to a story larger than the stone walls of his childhood. That evening, they camped near a quiet stream. The water murmured over smooth stones, the breeze carried the scent of pine and earth, and Elias felt the first true weight of choice settle in his chest, not as a burden, but as a quiet promise. He could walk forward, guided by the lessons of monks and the memory of a hidden lineage, or he could turn back, and for the first time, he realized that either path would carry meaning, but only one would carry him to who he was meant to become. By the following morning, Elias and Corvin had entered a forest that seemed to inhale the light of dawn. Trees rose tall and straight, their branches interlacing above to form a living roof, filtering sunlight into soft, dappled patterns on the forest floor. The air was cool and smelled of pine, resin, moss, and the faint tang of earth after dew. Every step felt deliberate, the soft crunch of leaves beneath their boots echoing like a heartbeat through the silence. Elias noticed the small details he had always been taught to observe. A spider spinning its web between two branches, droplets of water trembling on green leaves, the subtle call of a distant bird hidden deep in the canopy. These things grounded him, tethering his awareness to the present, even as the enormity of his newly discovered identity lingered quietly in his thoughts. Corvin led steadily, speaking sparingly. "The woods have ears," he said softly at one point, "and patience. They teach those who are willing to listen." Elias nodded, absorbing the wisdom, sensing that every rustle of leaves or shift of shadow was part of the forest's language. By midday, a small clearing revealed itself, where sunlight pooled warmly on soft grass. Elias knelt beside a stream, letting cool water run over his hands, listening to the gentle gurgle as if it spoke secrets meant only for him. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine life beyond the path palaces, courtyards, and the people who had been waiting for him as Alaric. Yet the fantasy was tempered by the calm certainty that he was still a boy who had been nurtured, trained, and protected. As the shadows grew longer, Corvin paused and pointed to a narrow trail leading deeper into the woods. "We must follow this path tonight," he said. "There are those who still remember the boy they call Prince." His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, yet it carried a weight that Elias could feel in his chest. Night fell slowly, brushing the treetops with deep indigo and gold. Stars appeared, small and patient, winking through gaps in the branches. Elias lay beside the campfire, listening to the forest sigh and murmur, feeling the quiet stretch of possibility all around him. The woods were alive, patient, and infinite, as though holding space for both the boy he had been and the prince he might one day become. He drifted toward sleep beside the fire, the ring heavy in his satchel, the weight of destiny tempered by the calm rhythm of the forest. Somewhere beyond the shadows, secrets waited, and he would meet them in time, not hurriedly, not fearfully, but with the patience of someone who had learned to listen. The forest seemed to exhale as dawn broke, pale light spilling through the branches like liquid silver. Elias stirred, stretching slowly, aware of the subtle hum of life around him, the rustle of leaves, the distant tapping of a woodpecker, and the soft gurgle of the stream that had become their morning companion. As they prepared to continue, Corvin halted, raising a hand. From the far edge of the clearing, a figure emerged, moving with deliberate calm. The stranger's cloak was deep green, blending with the forest, and a hood shadowed their face. Yet there was a quiet authority in the way they approached, a measured confidence that demanded attention without words. "I thought you might need guidance," the figure said, voice melodic and precise. They lowered the hood, revealing the sharp, knowing eyes of someone who had spent a lifetime observing the world. "I am Selene, sent by those who still remember the House of Veron." Elias studied her, calm but alert. He felt no fear, only recognition, as if some thread of memory long dormant stirred awake. The signet ring in his satchel seemed to thrum softly against his fingers, a subtle pulse that matched the rhythm of his own heartbeat. Selene continued, "The kingdom has been in quiet turmoil since your absence. Loyal families wait for the rightful heir, not as rulers who demand, but as leaders who guide. You are that heir, though your path will be slow, deliberate, and not without challenge." Elias nodded slowly, letting her words settle. The forest around them felt to hold its breath, the light pooling in patches over moss and roots. Here, beyond the monastery, Every detail mattered, every step, every shadow, every quiet choice. Corvin inclined his head. "We travel together for now," he said, "but she will take the lead in guiding you to those who await. Trust her as you trust the forest." Selene extended a hand, not commanding, but inviting. Elias accepted it, feeling the weight of his lineage settle gently onto his shoulders. The forest whispered around them, a patient chorus, and the path ahead widened, not with certainty, but with quiet possibility. That night, they camped beside a gentle brook. The stars reflected in its waters like silver lanterns, and Elias traced constellations with his mind, each one a quiet guide. Sleep came slowly, gentle as a lullaby, carrying him toward the morning with the knowledge that the journey had truly begun. By the third day of travel, the forest began to thin, revealing glimpses of rolling hills in the distance. The air changed subtly warmer, drier, with the faint scent of wildflowers drifting from meadows beyond. Elias noticed how every sound seemed amplified now. The whisper of wind across grass, the distant murmur of a stream, the soft padding of Selene's boots ahead of him. Selene guided them carefully down a narrow slope, stopping when they reached a cluster of stone cottages nestled between the hills. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and the faint hum of voices reached them, a small village, hidden, patient, and wary. It was a place that seemed untouched by the grandeur of castles or the chaos of politics. Yet here, beneath simple roofs, loyalty waited. "They have been expecting you," Selene said quietly, "not as a boy, but as a prince whose presence restores more than land or title, it restores hope." Elias observed the villagers cautiously. Children peered from behind doors. Adults paused in their work, eyes widening briefly before they returned to their tasks. None approached immediately, but a subtle energy filled the air, like tension held with respect rather than fear. Corvin whispered, "Patience. They are reading you as you are reading them. This is how trust begins." A woman emerged from one of the cottages, carrying a basket of herbs. Her face was lined with age and kindness, and when her eyes met Elias's, she smiled softly. "You are expected," she said simply. "Come and rest. You will need strength for the days ahead." Elias followed her through winding paths between cottages. The village smelled of earth, baked bread, and the faint smoke of cooking fires. Every sound, every scent, every detail settled into him. He felt no rush, only the quiet knowledge that this was the first step in a wider world, a place that had preserved the memory of his family even in his absence. That evening, they gathered in a small stone hall at the village's center. Selene and Corvin spoke in low tones to the elders while Elias observed, silent and attentive. The walls were warm with the glow of a fire, and the low murmur of conversation felt like a protective cocoon. As he lay on the simple pallet provided for him that night, Elias felt the weight of responsibility settle gently onto his shoulders. Yet it was not heavy. It was patient, quiet, like the forest they had passed through, like the monastery that had raised him. The world was vast, and he was small, but he was ready to begin learning how to carry both. The morning sun spilled softly across the rooftops of the village, painting the stone paths in shades of gold and amber. Elias rose slowly, feeling the warmth seep into his bones as he stepped outside. The air was crisp and fragrant with herbs, baking bread, and dew-kissed grass. Even the faint smoke from chimneys seemed calm, as though the village itself exhaled quietly in welcome. Selene led him through the village, introducing him to the elders and villagers who had awaited his arrival. Every greeting was measured, respectful, never rushed. Elias noticed their eyes, not just their faces, but the way they studied him carefully, searching for a confidence that had not yet fully emerged. yet somehow felt familiar. Corvin walked beside him, offering subtle guidance. "Observe," he said softly. "Trust is built slowly. Listen before you speak." The smallest gesture often carries the greatest meaning. The first lesson came from Mara, the village healer. She guided Elias to a small garden of medicinal herbs, sunlight filtering through latticed wooden trellises. Each plant she showed him had a purpose: to soothe, to heal, to protect. She spoke not only of remedies, but of patience, attentiveness, and the value of quiet care. "Leadership," Mara said, "is like tending a garden. You cannot force it. You must nurture it with attention, understanding, and calm. Only then will it grow." Elias absorbed the words with the same slow patience he had learned in the monastery. He felt the truth in them, the parallel between the care given to a plant and the care owed to those who would one day look to him. Throughout the day, the villagers observed him without imposing, offering small tasks to test his attentiveness and resolve. He helped carry water from the stream, mended a fence with Corvin's guidance, and even joined the children in a quiet game that required patience, skill, and careful attention. By evening, Elias sat on a gentle slope overlooking the village, the sun lowering the sky into deep amber and violet. He traced constellations in his mind, the same as in the forest, feeling a quiet continuity. Monastery, forest, village, all teaching him the art of observation, patience, and care. The first night in the village was calm, filled with the soft murmurs of distant voices and the gentle rustle of leaves. Elias understood that leadership was not immediate, not loud, and not demanding. It was quiet, attentive, and deliberate. And as sleep carried him beneath its gentle embrace, he felt the first stirrings of a deep, unshakable purpose. The following morning, Elias woke to a soft, diffused light spilling across the village. The air carried the scent of damp earth and fresh bread, a quiet reassurance of life continuing steadily around him. Birds called lazily in the treetops, and the distant murmur of the stream blended with the gentle sounds of villagers beginning their daily routines. As Elias walked toward the center of the village with Celine, he noticed movement at the edge of the hills beyond the cottages. A lone figure approached along the narrow path, traveling slowly but with careful purpose. The figure's presence seemed deliberate, yet unassuming, a shadow in the sunlight, neither threatening nor hurried. Selina's eyes narrowed slightly, though her expression remained composed. "We are not alone," she murmured. "Some come bearing news, some bearing intentions less clear. Observe before you react." Elias followed her gaze, noting the figure's posture, the rhythm of their steps, the way the cloak moved with the wind. He felt an old lesson from the monastery settling in: patience, awareness, quiet discernment. This was no ordinary visitor, he realized, and yet there was no need for alarm, only attention. The figure drew closer, revealing a hooded traveler whose gait carried the weight of someone accustomed to long journeys. When the traveler finally stepped into the sunlit village square, they paused and lifted their hood, revealing eyes both sharp and calm, like a hawk observing from a distant branch. "I come on behalf of the eastern provinces," the stranger said, voice steady but not loud. "They have heard of the boy raised by monks, the one who carries the blood of Veron. They seek guidance, and they seek hope." Elias felt the weight of his lineage settle gently upon him once more. He was not yet a ruler, not yet a prince in full authority, but the world was beginning to reach out, slowly, deliberately, like the tide brushing the shore. Corvin stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on Elias's shoulder. "Listen," he said softly. "There is much to learn before the journey is complete, and yet each step brings you closer to understanding what it means to carry both a name and a purpose." Elias nodded, feeling the calm certainty he had cultivated over years of study and patience. He would meet this visitor not with haste, not with fear, but with the awareness that every choice, every conversation, every observation was part of the path he was destined to walk. As the sun began its descent, painting the village in warm amber, Elias allowed himself a quiet breath, knowing that each day beyond the monastery taught him more than he had ever imagined, and that the world beyond the hills waited patiently, ready to test the boy who carried the name Alaric. By midday, the visitor had been welcomed into the village hall, and the elders gathered to speak in hushed tones. Elias stayed quietly to the side, observing the faces around him, their lines marked by age, care, and the weight of lives lived in the shadow of uncertainty. He felt their eyes on him, not in expectation, but in measured curiosity. Celine knelt beside him, whispering, "Today is your first real test beyond the monastery, not of skill or strength, but of patience and perception. Watch carefully, and do not act too quickly." Elias nodded, letting the words settle. He had learned from the monks that silence was never empty, that observation could reveal far more than speech. So he watched. The elders presented a problem. The villagers had been facing difficulties with the eastern river. Its waters had begun to rise unpredictably, threatening fields and homes. They had tried everything within their knowledge, yet the patterns remained mysterious. They sought advice not from a prince, not from authority, but from someone who could listen and perceive beyond immediate sight. Elias stepped forward slowly, feeling the ring in his satchel pulse softly against his palm. He walked to the riverbank later that day, accompanied by Corvin and Celine. The water flowed steadily, its surface catching the sunlight in sparkling fragments. Stones shifted gently beneath the current, reeds bent gracefully with its flow, and the faint scent of wet earth mingled with the air. He observed, he watched how the water moved around obstacles, how the color shifted with depth, how small eddies formed near the riverbank. Hours passed in quiet attention. He spoke only once, suggesting a subtle redirection of the channels that would allow the water to spread more evenly across the fields during high tides. Small adjustments, almost invisible, but precise. When the villagers implemented his guidance, the results were immediate. Water no longer surged dangerously against the banks, and the fields breathed again under the sun. Elias felt no triumph, no pride, only calm satisfaction. The lesson was clear. Leadership was not about force or display. It was about awareness, understanding, and gentle intervention at the right moment. That night, as the village settled under a sky dusted with stars, Elias lay on his pallet thinking of the river, its patience, its persistence, and the quiet strength of its flow. He realized that his journey as both Elias and Alaric would demand the same qualities. Calm observation, careful thought, and measured action would guide him more surely than any crown or command. The next morning, the village was bathed in soft light, the sky a pale blue stretching gently over the hills. Elias awoke to the distant crow of a rooster and the whispering rustle of the trees outside his window. He rose slowly, feeling the quiet weight of responsibility resting gently on his shoulders. Today felt different. He could sense it in the subtle hush that had settled over the village. After breakfast, Celine led Elias to the outskirts, to a small hill that overlooked the valley beyond. From this vantage, the world seemed wider, more patient. Smoke curled from distant cottages, a stream glinted in the sun, and the faint outline of mountains hinted at the territories that awaited his attention. As he gazed across the valley, a memory stirred, fragmented, elusive, but insistent. A faint echo of a chamber, walls of polished stone, voices speaking in hurried whispers, and a sense of urgency he could not place. It was a vision from his earliest days, before the monastery had embraced him, before he had been called Elias. Corvin noticed the faraway look in his eyes. "The past is patient," he said softly. "It will reveal itself when the time is right, but it can also teach you caution. Not all who approach carry goodwill." Celine stepped closer, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Shadows move even in daylight. Some are simply remnants of memory. Others are warnings. You must learn to distinguish between them." Elias inhaled deeply, feeling the crisp air fill his lungs. He realized that understanding his past was not only about reclaiming a title or a lineage, it was also about recognizing the forces that had shaped him, both seen and unseen. Every lesson from the monastery, every patient observation in the forest, every quiet act of leadership in the village had prepared him for this moment. The morning stretched on, slow and deliberate. Elias walked among the wildflowers along the hilltop, the soft scent of earth and bloom grounding him. He felt the quiet pulse of life around him, the bees, the wind, the distant river, and he understood that the shadows of the past could not move him unless he allowed them to. As evening fell, painting the valley in shades of amber and violet, Elias returned to the village, calm and reflective. The fire in his room flickered gently, shadows dancing across the walls. He lay down, feeling the presence of both Elias and Alaric within him, intertwined and steady. The past had made its whisper known, but it had not unsettled him. He was ready to meet whatever came next with patience, observation, and a quiet, unwavering resolve. The following day, as the sun rose over the hidden village, Elias was greeted with an unusual urgency. The villagers moved with a quiet tension, not fear, but alertness, as if anticipating something unseen. Celine beckoned him to follow, leading him past the cottages toward a small, open field bordered by ancient oaks. At its center stood a figure unfamiliar to Elias, a man tall and lean, draped in a cloak of deep navy, with eyes that seemed to measure everything they beheld. He carried no visible weapon, yet there was an unmistakable authority in his posture. As they approached, the man inclined his head. "I am Cale," he said, voice calm but firm. "I have traveled far to test the boy raised by monks, the one who carries the blood of Veron. A leader is forged not only by lineage, but by wisdom, patience, and discernment." Elias studied him carefully, feeling no fear, only a quiet curiosity. He had learned from the monastery to observe before acting, to listen before speaking. He understood that this was a trial, though its rules were not yet clear. Cale gestured to the field, where a series of small, intricate obstacles had been arranged: fallen logs, uneven stones, and subtle markers placed to test observation and strategy. "Your challenge," Cale explained, "is to navigate this course without haste, without arrogance, and without harming what surrounds you. Watch, think, and act deliberately." Elias nodded, stepping forward slowly. His bare hands brushed the Duladen grass as he assessed the obstacles. Every movement was measured, deliberate, a rhythm he had honed during years of quiet discipline. He noticed how shadows shifted over the logs, how the stones were subtly unstable, how the smallest misstep could disturb the balance of the path. As he moved through the course, Cale observed silently, his eyes following every careful step. Elias' mind was calm, alert, and attuned to every detail: the whisper of wind, the subtle shifts of the earth, the faint creak of a bending branch. He did not rush, he did not force the path. He simply moved, patient, attentive, and aware. When he reached the end, Cale finally spoke, his voice carrying the faintest hint of approval. "You are not only patient, Elias, you are perceptive. These are the first marks of a true leader." Elias felt no pride, only calm acknowledgement. The lesson was subtle, yet profound. Leadership was not conquest, nor command. It was awareness, attentiveness, and the gentle shaping of a world already in motion. As he returned to the village, the late afternoon sun warmed his shoulders, and he felt a quiet certainty settling deeper into him. The journey toward becoming Alaric, the prince, had begun in earnest. That evening, as the sky melted into deep hues of violet and gold, the villagers gathered in the central hall. The soft crackle of fire filled the room, casting a warm glow over worn wooden beams and stone walls. Shadows danced gently across the faces of those assembled, revealing lines of worry, hope, and quiet anticipation. Elias entered calmly, feeling both the weight and the comfort of their attention. Selene guided him to a seat near the center, where he could see and hear without dominating. The elders spoke in measured tones, sharing news of distant provinces, subtle unrest among neighboring lands, and the quiet longing of families loyal to the House of Veron. Elias listened carefully, absorbing each word, each inflection, each pause. The world outside the village was larger, more complex, and infinitely patient in its ways, like a river that moves slowly, yet shapes everything it touches. Corvin leaned closer. Do not speak unless you must. Observe, listen, and understand. Every detail matters, even those that seem small. Elias nodded. One of the elders, a woman with silver-streaked hair, looked directly at him. You are young, she said softly, and yet you carry the blood of our house. We do not ask you to act as a king tonight. We only ask that you learn, that you understand our needs, and that you carry our trust carefully. Elias felt the familiar calm rise within him, the same calm that had guided him through monastery halls, forest paths, and the lessons of patience by the river. He spoke then, quietly, deliberately. I will listen, I will learn, and I will honor the trust you place in me. A subtle murmur of approval rippled through the room, not loud or commanding, but steady and warm. The villagers returned to their discussions, sharing strategies, observing patterns, and offering solutions. Elias noticed how each contribution, however small, built a web of understanding, stronger than any single voice. As the fire burned low and night deepened outside, Elias stepped outside to the quiet of the village square. The stars glimmered overhead, scattered like tiny lanterns guiding the way forward. He inhaled the cool night air, feeling the rhythm of the village, the forest beyond, and the distant mountains all flow together in patient harmony. He realized that leadership, like the firelight, did not demand attention to blaze it, only needed to illuminate steadily, patiently, and without haste. And as Elias lay beneath the canopy of stars that night, the weight of his lineage rested gently on him, tempered by the calm certainty of a boy who had learned to listen, observe, and wait. The next morning, Elias awoke to the gentle song of the river that ran near the village. Its waters glistened silver under the early sun, moving slowly over smooth stones, bending gracefully around roots and reeds. He stepped barefoot to its edge, letting the cool, clear water lap against his feet, each ripple brushing a quiet warmth into his skin. Selene joined him in silence, watching the currents with patient eyes. Rivers teach more than books, she said softly. They remind us that persistence is quiet, that patience shapes everything in time, and that awareness is the key to understanding movement, both of water and of people. Elias nodded, dipping his hands into the flowing stream. He traced patterns in the water, noticing eddies and whirlpools, areas where the current slowed, and places where it surged. Each subtle movement carried meaning if he paid attention. Slowly, he realized the river mirrored life itself. It was not the force of water alone that shaped the valley. but its persistence and careful navigation around obstacles. He sat by the bank, closing his eyes, imagining the river as the path he was beginning to walk, the journey from boy to prince. Every choice, every observation, every careful decision could redirect currents gently, without force, yet with impact far beyond immediate sight. Corvin approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Remember, young one," he said, "a leader is like the river, steady, aware, patient, and prepared to flow around obstacles rather than crash through them." Elias opened his eyes, watching the sunlight dance on the moving water. He felt the calm certainty of his own presence, the quiet power of observation, and the growing awareness of the responsibilities that awaited him beyond the village. As the day wore on, he practiced more than simply walking along the river. He studied the plants that thrived on its banks, the insects skimming its surface, the fish darting beneath. He noticed how every life interacted, how balance persisted naturally when attention was given. Each observation strengthened the connection between him and the world around him, preparing him for the greater currents of life he would soon navigate as Alaric. By dusk, Elias sat on the riverbank, letting the gentle flow of water lull his thoughts into quiet reflection. The world was vast, patient, and ever-moving, and for the first time he understood that being a prince was not about crowns or commands. It was about carrying life with awareness, patience, and calm determination, just as he had been taught in the monastery and through the quiet guidance of the forest and the village. The following morning, the mist clung to the hills like a soft veil, curling around the distant mountains that rose beyond the village. Elias walked alongside Selene and Corvin, the early sunlight painting their path in pale gold. Each step on the damp earth felt deliberate, grounding him in the present, even as his thoughts drifted toward the mountains looming ahead, silent, patient, and immovable. Selene led them to a narrow trail that wound upward toward a ridge, the village shrinking behind them with every careful step. The air grew cooler, tinged with the scent of pine and damp stone. The birdsong of the valley below faded, replaced by the occasional creak of branches swaying gently and the soft hiss of wind through high grasses. "The mountains speak differently," Selene said, her voice low. "They remind us that strength is quiet, that endurance comes not from force but from persistence, and that patience can outlast storms. You must listen closely if you are to understand what lies ahead." Elias nodded, observing the subtle shifts in the terrain. Loose stones, hidden roots, and sudden inclines required attention, care, and awareness. Each movement, though small, had consequences. He felt a growing sense of familiarity, the calm precision learned in the monastery, the patience honed along the forest paths, and the subtle understanding of balance from the river, all converging as tools to navigate the path before him. As they ascended, a gentle breeze carried whispers of the past. Elias imagined the mountains as guardians of memory, holding stories of kings and princes, of battles long ended, of promises quietly kept. He felt the echo of his own lineage stir within him, the blood of Veron, hidden, patient, waiting to be recognized. By midday, they paused at a plateau, overlooking the sweeping valley below. Sunlight spilled over forests and fields, rivers glinting like silver threads. Elias inhaled deeply, letting the view settle into him, grounding him in both past and present. He felt the quiet truth of his journey. Leadership, patience, and awareness were intertwined, as inseparable as mountains and rivers, as enduring as the land itself. That night, camped beneath the stars on the ridge, Elias allowed the silence to fill him completely. The mountains seemed to watch over him, and he, in turn, felt their steady presence seep into his bones. He understood that the path ahead would be challenging, but it would also be guided by patience, observation, and the quiet strength that comes from knowing oneself. The morning air on the ridge was crisp, carrying the scent of pine, stone, and the distant wildflowers that clung stubbornly to the slopes. Elias rose before the sun, feeling the cool earth beneath his feet, and watched as light slowly spilled over the valleys below. Every detail the way shadows shifted, the faint rustle of the wind, the glint of dew on the grass was vivid and alive, a quiet reminder that observation could guide him more reliably than haste ever could. Celine motioned toward a narrow, winding trail that disappeared between two steep ridges. "This path is hidden," she said softly. "Few know it, and fewer still have traveled it without careful attention. It will teach you how to walk lightly, how to trust your awareness, and how to sense the patterns in a world that is rarely obvious." Elias nodded, adjusting his satchel, feeling the reassuring weight of the signet ring inside. He stepped forward deliberately, placing one foot carefully before the other, aware of every loose stone, every hidden root, every whisper of movement in the grass. The path was narrow, twisting, and occasionally treacherous, but he moved with calm certainty, his senses attuned to the rhythm of the land. Midway along the trail, a sudden sound, a crack of a branch, perhaps, or the shift of some unseen creature made him pause. Instead of fear, he felt patience. He crouched lightly, observing the shadows and listening to the subtle movements around him. Nothing rushed, nothing pressured him. After a moment he continued, the path revealing itself gradually, as if recognizing his careful attention and allowing him passage. By midday, the trail opened onto a quiet plateau where a small, hidden spring bubbled gently from the rock. The water was clear, cold, and shimmering, and Elias knelt beside it, cupping handfuls and letting the cool liquid trickle through his fingers. He noticed the plants that grew nearby, the insects skimming the surface, and the soft moss that cushioned the stone beneath him. Every detail seemed deliberate, each element teaching him the subtle ways of balance and life beyond what he had known in the monastery or village. Celine and Corvin settled nearby, speaking only in whispers. "The hidden path shows that the world is never straightforward," Celine said. "Those who hurry or force their way often miss its lessons, but those who observe, who listen, who move patiently find their way and find themselves along it." As night fell, Elias lay beside the spring, the stars reflected in the water like tiny lanterns guiding the path forward. The cool breeze carried the scent of pine and earth, and the quiet rhythm of the hidden spring lulled him into deep reflection. He understood now that every journey, no matter how direct it appeared, held hidden lessons for those willing to notice, to wait, and to move with quiet intention. The next morning, Elias woke to the sound of wind moving through the ridges, soft and deliberate, like a voice carried across the mountains. He stepped from his resting place, the cool air brushing against his skin, the scent of stone and pine grounding him in the present. The hidden path stretched ahead, winding between peaks and dipping into shaded valleys where sunlight played in gentle patches on the ground. Celine led, Corvin close behind, both moving with the quiet assurance of those who had walked these trails many times. Elias followed, attentive to every sound, the snap of a twig underfoot, the distant call of a hawk, the rustle of grasses swaying with the breeze. Each movement of the wind seemed to carry information, subtle and almost imperceptible, about the land around him. "The wind speaks to those who listen," Celine said softly. "It tells you where the earth is soft, where danger lies hidden, where the path opens unexpectedly. Patience and observation are the ears of the traveler." Elias closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the breeze against his face. It whispered across his skin, swirling in the folds of his robe. tugging gently at his hair. He let his mind settle, matching the rhythm of the air, allowing it to guide his senses. He could feel the land beneath him, subtle shifts in elevation, the presence of rocks hidden under grass, the movement of unseen animals, all revealed in the whispers carried by the wind. As the sun climbed higher, the trio reached a narrow canyon where the path twisted sharply between stone walls. Here, the wind intensified, carrying a sharp, cool bite that reminded Ilias to move slowly, to place his steps carefully. The canyon required patience, deliberate choices, and awareness of every detail. One wrong move, and the stones could slip beneath his feet. Elias moved steadily, feet sure, hands brushing lightly against the canyon walls for balance. With each careful step, he felt a quiet confidence building inside him, not arrogance, but calm certainty. The wind continued its whispers, guiding him, teaching him, and reminding him that the smallest attentiveness could make all the difference. By the time they emerged from the canyon, the valley beyond unfolded like a secret painted in gold and green. Elias paused, letting the breeze carry the scent of wildflowers and fresh earth deep into his lungs. He understood then that patience was not passive, it was an active listening, a constant awareness that shaped every step. As night fell, the stars shimmered above, and the wind softened into a gentle murmur. Elias lay beneath the open sky, feeling the weight of the day settle into him. He understood more clearly than ever that leadership, like the wind, was subtle, pervasive, and patient, and that every lesson from the monastery, the forest, the river, and the hidden paths had been preparing him for this very understanding. The morning light spilled over the horizon, turning the valley below into a patchwork of gold and green. Elias descended slowly, following the winding trail that led from the high ridges into the lower lands. The air grew warmer, carrying the scents of wild grasses and distant flowers. Each step echoed softly off the hills, the sound lingering for a heartbeat before fading, a subtle reminder that the world remembered every action, every movement, even if only for a moment. Celine led the way, pointing out details along the valley floor. A small herd of deer grazing quietly, a distant stream reflecting sunlight like a silver ribbon, the gentle sway of tall grasses as the wind moved through them. "The valley has its own memory," she said. "Every sound, every movement, every choice is remembered here. Learn to walk with care, and you will understand it." Elias listened, attentive. Each echo, each sound, each subtle shift in the environment taught him more than he could have imagined. The valley seemed alive, patient, and observant, responding to the presence of those who moved through it with quiet respect. By midday, they reached a small grove of ancient trees, their trunks thick and knotted with age. A soft mist clung to the roots, and the light filtered through the leaves in gentle streams. Ilias sat on a moss-covered stone, resting while observing the life around him. The way a spider wove its web, the delicate flutter of a bird's wings, the subtle shimmer of insects skimming the surface of a hidden pool. "The Valley of Echoes," Celine explained, kneeling beside him, "teaches patience and awareness. Listen to the echoes, not just of sound, but of actions, of intentions. You will find that the world speaks in many ways if you take the time to hear it." Elias closed his eyes, letting the quiet of the grove fill him. He thought of the monastery, the forest, the hidden paths, the river, all places where he had learned to move carefully, to observe patiently, to respond deliberately. Here, the echoes of the land carried the same lessons, deeper now, more resonant, as if the world itself was shaping him into the prince he was destined to become. As evening descended, the valley glowed with soft amber light. Shadows stretched long across the ground, and the sounds of nocturnal creatures began their gentle chorus. Elias lay beneath the ancient trees, listening to the murmurs of the valley, feeling the rhythm of life in every echo, and understanding that patience, observation, and quiet attentiveness were not just lessons, they were the foundation of his journey forward. The next morning, Elias and his companions left the Valley of Echoes, following a winding trail that led toward distant hills bathed in soft sunlight. The air was fresher now, carrying hints of wildflowers and the earthy scent of forests beyond. Each step was deliberate, Elias' mind attentive to every detail, the way a bird arched in flight, the rustle of leaves beneath the wind, and the subtle hum of life in the earth itself. After several hours, they arrived at a small eastern village, tucked quietly between the hills. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and the soft murmur of voices echoed along stone paths. The villagers paused in their work to observe the newcomers, their gazes calm but watchful. Elias noticed how their eyes carried a subtle blend of expectation and careful curiosity. "This village has long been loyal to your family," Celine explained as they entered the center of town. "They do not yet know you, but they remember the bloodline. Your presence will be felt more than your words. Observe carefully and act deliberately." Corvin guided him to a small stone house at the edge of the village. The interior was modest but warm, with sunlight spilling over a woven rug and simple wooden furniture. Elias took a seat by the window, watching the villagers moving about their day. A child chasing a dog, a woman carrying baskets of herbs, a man tending to a small fire. Each movement was ordinary, yet within the ordinariness, Elias noticed patterns, the rhythm of life, the interdependence of people, the quiet harmony that underlay the daily work. Later, in the village square, the elders gathered him quietly. They spoke of challenges, small conflicts over fields, disputes about the river's course, and the subtle tensions of a village balancing its needs with loyalty to distant authority. Elias listened patiently, absorbing every word. He said little, offering only small suggestions grounded in observation and careful reflection. By sunset, the village seemed calmer, more balanced. The villagers, though still cautious, had accepted his presence, not as a boy or as an unknown prince, but as someone who watched, understood, and responded without haste. As night fell, Elias sat beneath the soft glow of a lantern outside his temporary lodging, the faint scent of burning wood drifting in the air. He reflected on the day, on the lessons of observation and patience, and on the subtle weight of responsibility that had been steadily settling onto his shoulders. For the first time, he felt the breath of his lineage not as a burden, but as a guide. The stars appeared one by one in the clear sky above, and Elias allowed himself to rest, listening to the quiet rhythms of the village, the distant river, and the soft whisper of wind through the hills. He was no longer only Elias. Raised by Monksy was Alaric, slowly stepping into the life he had been born to, with patience, awareness, and calm determination lighting the way forward. The morning arrived with the gentle haze, softening the outlines of the eastern village and filling the streets with a calm, golden light. Elias rose quietly, aware of the subtle bustle of villagers beginning their day, the rhythmic sound of a wheel turning at the mill, chickens clucking as they scrambled across the paths, and the faint scent of bread baking. Each detail, small and ordinary, felt significant, as if it held a lesson waiting to be learned. Celine guided him to the center of the village, where elders and villagers had gathered for a quiet council. "Leadership," she whispered, "is not shown through force or command. It is felt through presence, patience, and understanding. Today, you will practice listening before speaking, observing before acting." Elias nodded, settling into a space where he could watch unobtrusively. The villagers spoke of small disputes, minor conflicts that required careful attention rather than swift judgment. Children had been caught quarreling over the use of a shared field, and a disagreement had arisen over the direction of a new irrigation channel. Every issue, though seemingly simple, revealed deeper undercurrents, patterns of behavior, unspoken loyalties, and the quiet interplay of community trust. Elias listened intently. He did not rush to offer solutions, but allowed the discussions to unfold. He noted the body language of those speaking, the subtle inflections in their voices, the pauses that carried meaning. Every observation added to a growing understanding, a mosaic of the village's needs and rhythms. When he finally spoke, his words were calm and deliberate. The field belongs to all who use it. Let us create a schedule so that each child has time to play and work without conflict. And for the channel, let us consider the flow of water carefully, observing where it naturally moves before altering its course. The villagers nodded, their faces reflecting relief and quiet approval. There was no applause, no fanfare, only the gentle acknowledgement of guidance given with awareness and care. By evening, Elias walked along the village edges, observing the rhythms of daily life as shadows lengthened across stone and earth. The sun dipped behind distant hills, painting the sky in hues of amber and soft rose. He thought of the monastery, the river, the hidden paths, and the valley it had taught him patience, observation, and deliberate action. Now, he was learning to apply these lessons, not to isolated tasks, but to living, breathing communities. As night fell, the village glimmered softly under lantern light. Elias lay in quiet reflection, the calm certainty of his growing understanding settling deep within him. Leadership, he realized, was not a title or a crown. It was the careful, patient shaping of trust, awareness, and presence. And he, slowly but steadily, was becoming ready to carry that responsibility as both Elias and Alaric. A week later, the eastern village prepared for a quiet festival to celebrate the coming of spring. Lanterns were strung along the streets, their soft glow flickering in the gentle breeze. The air was warm with the scent of wildflowers and baking bread, and the distant hum of villagers working together carried a calm, soothing rhythm. Elias watched as preparations unfolded, noticing how the community moved in harmony. Children carefully carrying lanterns, elders arranging offerings of fruit and herbs, and young adults weaving garlands from spring blossoms. Every motion had purpose, yet flowed with ease. The village seemed to breathe as one entity, and Elias felt a deep understanding of connection settle in his chest. Celine leaned close. "Festivals teach more than celebration," she whispered. "They teach observation, timing, and patience. A leader must understand the subtle dynamics of people, their fears, their joys, and how small gestures ripple through the lives of many." Throughout the day, Elias moved quietly among the villagers. He helped children tie lanterns, offered gentle guidance to those arranging garlands, and observed the careful coordination of the elders. He noticed the small conflicts, dropped ribbon, a spilled basket of flowers, and the soft ways the villagers corrected them, with patience and understanding rather than anger. As dusk approached, the lanterns were lit, casting a warm, golden glow over the village square. The soft flicker reflected in the stream nearby, turning water into moving threads of light. Elias felt the quiet magic of the moment, the harmony of preparation, the patient attention of the villagers, and the gentle flow of life in which he was beginning to play a careful role. Celine placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Watch carefully. Leadership is not shown by command alone, but by presence, by seeing, understanding, and responding with calm intention." As the first lanterns were raised, Elias felt a subtle shift within himself. The lessons of the monastery, the forest, the hidden paths, the valley, and the village had all converged into something steady and enduring. He understood now that patience, awareness, and careful observation were not just practices, they were the foundation of who he was becoming. That night, as the festival lights glimmered and laughter floated softly on the breeze, Elias lay beneath the stars. The glow of lanterns mirrored the faint shimmer of his own destiny, quiet but certain. He felt ready not for crowns or proclamations, but for the gentle, deliberate journey of guiding, observing, and caring for those who would one day look to him as both boy and prince. The morning after the festival dawned clear and crisp, the village bathed in pale golden light. Elias rose before the sun, noticing the lingering scent of lantern smoke and fresh earth. The tranquility of the festival had left a gentle hum in the air, as if the village itself were still breathing the calm rhythm of celebration. As he walked along the edge of the village, a faint figure appeared from the tree line, moving deliberately, almost as if the wind itself carried them forward. The stranger's steps were silent on the soft earth, their cloak blending with the greens and browns of the hills. Elias sensed immediately that this was no ordinary visitor, yet he felt no fear, only calm awareness, the steady patience he had cultivated over weeks of travel and observation. The figure paused at a respectful distance, bowing lightly. "Prince Alaric," they said, voice low but clear, "I come with a message from the Western lands. They have heard of your presence, and their leaders wish to speak with you. The journey is long, and the path uncertain, but they carry both guidance and warning." Elias studied the messenger carefully, noticing the small details, the way their eyes flitted briefly to the hills behind them, the subtle tension in their shoulders, the slight wear in their boots from travel. Every observation gave him a quiet understanding, not just of the messenger, but of the world they represented. Cautious, watchful, and patient in its approach, Celine stepped closer, whispering, "This is your first message beyond the village. It is subtle, quiet, yet significant. Observe carefully, judge patiently, and act deliberately." Elias nodded. He took the message with slow, respectful hands, feeling the weight of responsibility settle gently onto his shoulders. The messenger inclined their head once more before turning to leave, their presence fading into the soft light of morning as though they had been part of the wind itself. He spent the rest of the day preparing for the journey west, walking the village paths slowly, observing the rhythm of life one last time before leaving. He noted the small acts of care, the patient routines of the villagers, and the quiet way trust had been built through weeks of calm attention. That night, Elias sat beneath the open sky, the stars scattered like lanterns above the hills. He traced constellations with his eyes, each one a quiet reminder of the path ahead. The message from the Western lands was a call to action, but it was not rushed. It required patience, observation, and careful planning, qualities he had been steadily cultivating. As he lay down, the cool night air brushing against his face, Elias understood that this journey was no longer only about discovery. It was about learning how to carry the weight of both knowledge and responsibility with calm certainty. The world beyond the village waited patiently, and he was ready to step into it, one careful, deliberate step at a time. At dawn, Elias packed his few belongings, the signet ring heavy yet reassuring in his satchel. The eastern village, now bathed in the soft pink of early light, seemed almost to sigh at their departure, as if recognizing the journey that lay ahead. Villagers gathered quietly to watch, their expressions calm, yet carrying a subtle mix of pride and hope. Elias understood the unspoken trust they placed in him. It was steady, quiet, and humbling. Selene and Corvin led the way, their steps deliberate along the narrow trail that twisted through low hills and scattered groves. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine, earth, and distant wildflowers. Birds called intermittently, their songs threading through the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft crunch of their footsteps on the trail. Elias moved with careful awareness, observing the small signs of life around him. The way moss clung to stones, how shadows shifted with the sun, and the distant glint of water winding through the valleys below. "The western path is long," Selene said softly, her voice blending with the breeze. "It will test patience, judgment, and resolve, but it is also the path of growth, the way to understanding what it means to carry both blood and responsibility." Elias nodded, feeling the calm certainty that had grown inside him. The lessons of the monastery, the forest, the hidden paths, the valley, and the village had all prepared him for this moment. Now, the journey itself would teach him about the wider world, the politics, the people, and the quiet, intricate ways in which leadership moved unseen. By midday, they reached a narrow pass between hills, where the wind whispered and shadows stretched long across the path. Here, careful attention was required. Loose stones, hidden roots, and subtle shifts in terrain demanded steady feet and a watchful eye. Elias walked slowly, placing each step with intention, feeling the rhythm of the land beneath him, and learning to move as a part of it rather than against it. As evening approached, they found a sheltered glade beside a small stream. The water was clear and cold, glinting with the last rays of sunlight. Elias knelt beside it, cupping his hands to drink, feeling the coolness seep into his skin. The day's journey had been long, yet deliberate movement, observation, and patient navigation had made every step meaningful. That night, as the sky darkened to deep indigo, Elias lay beneath the stars, listening to the gentle murmur of the stream and the distant call of nocturnal birds. He thought of the western lands awaiting him, the message carried by the silent messenger, and the responsibilities he would face there. Calm certainty filled him. The path ahead was challenging, but he was prepared, guided by patience, awareness, and the quiet strength that had been nurtured since his earliest days in the monastery. The night wrapped around him like a soft cloak, carrying the promise of a journey that would continue, steady and deliberate, toward destiny. The morning air was cool and fragrant as Elias and his companions left the glade, the stream's gentle murmur fading behind them. The path ahead climbed gradually, leading into the hills of Vigilanza, stretch of land known for its rolling peaks, hidden valleys, and ever-shifting shadows. The sunlight glinted off dewy grass, and the wind carried faint scents of wild herbs and distant forests. Elias walked with deliberate care, each step measured. He felt the rhythm of the hills beneath his feet, noting every loose stone, every hidden dip, and the subtle ways the wind shifted around the terrain. The lessons of patience and awareness, practiced in the monastery, the forest, and the village, guided him with a steady hand. Selene moved ahead, her eyes scanning the slopes and valleys with practiced attention. "These hills are quiet, but they watch," she said softly. "They teach vigilance. A leader must see what others do not, sense what is hidden, and act with calm precision." Corvin nodded, walking close beside Elias. "Do not rush," he reminded him. "Observe. Each detail matters. The hills will test your patience, and through that, your understanding of yourself." As they ascended, faint signs of movement appeared, a disturbed patch of grass here, a subtle shadow there. Elias noticed the tracks of animals, the broken branches of trees, and the shift of rocks under the wind. Every observation carried meaning, revealing the hidden life of the hills. By midday, they reached a small plateau, that offered a sweeping view of the lands beyond. Valleys stretched into distant forests, rivers glimmered in the sunlight, and the horizon was painted with soft gold and green. Elias paused, breathing deeply, letting the quiet strength of the hills seep into him. He felt the weight of his lineage, steady yet patient, and the growing certainty that every careful step shaped not only the path before him, but also the person he was becoming. As evening fell, they made camp beneath a cluster of sturdy oaks. The wind softened, carrying the faint rustle of leaves and distant calls of nocturnal creatures. Elias lay on his bedroll, feeling the hills around him as a gentle presence, a quiet reminder that vigilance is not tension, but attentive calm, and that the world moves with patterns that reveal themselves only to those willing to notice. The stars emerged overhead, scattered like lanterns across the indigo sky. Elias closed his eyes, letting the rhythm of the hills, the wind, and the night settle deep within him. The journey west was long, the challenges ahead many, but he felt prepared, steady, aware, and patient, moving forward with the quiet certainty of the following morning. A thin veil of mist clung to the hills of vigilance, softening the landscape in a pale silver haze. Elias rose quietly, feeling the cool, damp air brushing against his skin and carrying the faint scent of pine and wet earth. Every breath seemed to anchor him to the moment, every step a careful observation of the hidden details beneath the mist. Celine led the way down a winding path that descended toward a valley, blanketed in fog. "The misty valley teaches discernment," she whispered. "Not everything is clear at first glance. A leader must learn to see through uncertainty, to feel what is hidden, and to act with calm clarity." Elias nodded, focusing on each movement. The path was narrow, lined with rocks, slick from dew, and tangled roots threatened to trip the unwary. He placed each foot deliberately, hands brushing lightly against the sides of the trail for balance, and let his senses extend beyond sight to the sounds of distant water, the faint rustle of leaves, and the subtle vibrations through the earth. Halfway down, a low humming drifted through the mist, soft and steady, like a thread weaving through the valley. Elias paused, closing his eyes, allowing the sound to guide his attention. The hum was neither threatening nor urgent. It seemed to hold the rhythm of life itself, teaching patience and awareness. Corvin spoke softly. "The valley shows us that perception is more than seeing. Listen, feel. Notice what moves quietly, what whispers rather than shouts. Understanding comes to those who observe patiently." As the sun rose higher, the mist began to shift, revealing glimpses of hidden streams, wildflowers bending with the wind, and small animals cautiously emerging. Elias noted each detail, the way water carved gentle channels through the earth, the patterns of leaves catching droplets of moisture, the subtle trails animals had made in the damp soil. Every observation added to his growing understanding of balance, patience, and subtle leadership. By late afternoon, they reached the heart of the valley, a quiet clearing with a small pool reflecting the grey-gold light filtering through the mist. Elias knelt by the water, letting the serenity of the place settle into him. The mist swirled softly around him, carrying with it a sense of calm vigilance. He realized that uncertainty, like the fog, was not to be feared, but understood and navigated with care. As night fell, the valley darkened, and stars began to pierce the lingering mist. Elias lay on a soft patch of grass, listening to the subtle hum of life around him. The misty valley had taught him patience, discernment, and awareness, lessons that would serve him far beyond its borders. As he continued toward the western lands and the responsibilities that awaited him, the morning light seeped gently through the lingering mist of the valley, painting the landscape in soft silver and pale green. Elias rose slowly, feeling the crisp air brush against his face as he adjusted his satchel. Ahead, the trail began to rise again, leading toward a narrow mountain pass said to be guarded by a mysterious sentinel who tested all who traveled westward. Celine and Corvin walked ahead, their steps steady and measured. The Guardian watches not for battle, but for understanding. Celine whispered, "It is not strength alone that is tested here, but patience, awareness, and the quiet judgment of a leader." Elias felt a calm certainty settle into him as they approached the entrance to the pass. The rocks were jagged and worn, streaked with moss, and shadows played across the narrow corridor in shifting patterns. The air was cooler here, scented faintly with stone and distant pine, carrying a subtle weight of history, as if the mountain itself remembered all who had passed through. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the edge of the trail, a tall, cloaked figure, its features obscured in shadow. The presence was commanding yet calm, radiating quiet authority rather than threat. Elias stopped, letting his breath settle and his senses sharpen. Every detail mattered: the slight movement of the cloak, the way the figure shifted its weight, the faint glint of sunlight on a hidden object. "You seek passage," the figure said, voice low and resonant. "To move forward, you must show patience, perception, and respect. Those who rush, who act without awareness, will falter." Elias bowed slightly, hands at his sides. "I am Elias," he said, voice calm but steady. "I have learned to observe, to listen, and to act deliberately. I seek passage with awareness and patience." The Guardian studied him for a long moment, eyes sharp yet serene. Then, without a word, they stepped aside, gesturing toward the narrow path winding through the mountains. The pass itself was treacherous, lined with loose rocks and shaded alcoves. Yet Elias walked deliberately, placing each step with care. Every shift in the stone, every subtle vibration of the earth beneath him, guided his movement. By midday, they reached a plateau halfway through the pass, where a gentle stream bubbled through moss-covered rocks. Elias knelt by the water, letting the cool liquid trickle over his hands, feeling the calm strength of the mountains around him. He realized that vigilance was not constant tension, but attentive awareness, steady patience, and careful observation, qualities that the Guardian had tested with silent expectation. As night fell, Elias lay beneath the starlit sky on the plateau, the wind whispering softly through the pass. The mountains had taught him that the path of leadership required not only courage but perception, patience, and the ability to move deliberately even when the way was uncertain. He felt the quiet confidence of someone learning to carry both his name and his responsibilities with care. The morning sun filtered softly through the narrow pass, painting long golden streaks across jagged stones and moss-covered ledges. Elias awoke to the gentle murmur of wind moving through the mountains, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and cold rock. Every breath felt grounding, anchoring him to the present. Yet the place seemed alive with whispers from the past. As they continued westward, the mountains around them revealed subtle signs of history: carved stones at the base of cliffs, the faint remains of old walls, and the occasional symbol etched into rock, worn by time and weather. Each mark told a story of those who had walked these paths long before, leaders, wanderers, and guardians who had left behind lessons carved not in books but in the very land. Celine paused, her hand brushing lightly over a weathered carving. "These mountains remember," she said softly. "They carry the echoes of those who came before." A wise leader learns not only from people but from the land itself, its patience, endurance, and subtle instruction. Elias knelt beside the stone, tracing the worn lines with careful fingers. He imagined the hands that had carved them, the purpose behind each mark, and the lives that had passed through these mountains. He felt a quiet reverence settle in him, a gentle awareness that his own journey was part of a larger story, one that stretched beyond time, carrying both challenge and guidance. By midday, the trail opened onto a small plateau that overlooked a wide valley bathed in sunlight. The distant forests shimmered with a golden green, and a river wound lazily like a silver thread through the landscape. Elias took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the view sink deep into his senses. Every detail, the curve of the river, the sway of the trees, the flicker of shadows over the hills, felt like a lesson in patience and observation. Corvin rested a hand on his shoulder. The echoes of history teach us that true strength lies not in force or haste, but in careful awareness. Those who understand the past can guide the future. As evening approached, Ilya settled by a small fire on the plateau. The wind carried a soft, steady hum through the mountains, blending with the faint rustle of distant trees. He reflected on the carvings, the subtle lessons of the past, and the silent guidance of the land itself. The echoes of history were patient. They waited for those willing to observe, to listen, and to carry their wisdom forward. Under the starlit sky, Elias felt the growing certainty of his path. He was no longer just a boy raised by monks. He was stepping into the role of a leader, a prince, guided by patience, awareness, and the quiet lessons of the world around him. The mountains had spoken, and he had listened. The next morning, Elias awoke to the gentle sound of water flowing far below the mountains. The path descended toward a wide river, its surface sparkling like liquid silver under the rising sun. Mist rose from the current, curling around rocks and reeds, carrying the scent of cool water and damp earth. Elias felt a familiar calm as he stepped closer, aware of the delicate balance between the rushing river and the path that would carry them across. Celine crouched near the riverbank, tracing her hand over a smooth stone. "This crossing will test more than strength," she said softly. "It will require patience, observation, and subtle understanding. The river moves with its own rhythm. Those who force it will falter. Those who observe it can flow with it." Elias knelt beside the water, letting the cool current brush against his hands. He watched carefully how it moved around rocks, the tiny eddies forming near the banks, and the subtle changes in speed and depth. Each detail carried meaning. The current was strong in some places, gentle in others, and the patterns shifted constantly. Corvin pointed to a series of stepping stones that barely broke the water's surface. "The stones are uneven, and some are slippery," he said. "One wrong step can send you into the river. Watch carefully, move deliberately, and let the rhythm of the water guide you." Elias nodded, feeling the steady pulse of awareness deepen within him. He placed his first foot carefully on the nearest stone, testing its stability. Then the next, feeling the subtle sway beneath him. He moved slowly, deliberately, letting the movement of the river guide his balance rather than forcing it. Each step required patience, attention, and calm determination. Halfway across, the current strengthened, tugging lightly at his legs and making the stones beneath him shift ever so slightly. Elias paused, closed his eyes for a heartbeat, and felt the pulse of the river. He adjusted his stance, leaning subtly into the flow, and continued forward with gentle, measured steps. The rhythm of the water became almost like a companion, guiding him steadily across. By the time he reached the far bank, the sun was high, sparkling on the rippling river. Elias stood on solid ground, feeling a deep sense of calm satisfaction. The crossing had not been hurried or forced. It had been observed, understood, and respected. The lesson was clear. Leadership, like the river, required patience, awareness, and harmony with the forces around him, not domination over them. As the day faded into evening, Elias rested by the riverbank, watching the current carry leaves and light reflections downstream. The gentle flow mirrored the lessons he had learned at the quiet, persistent guidance of observation, patience, and careful action. He felt the growing certainty within himself that every step he took, every choice he made, would carry the same steady, deliberate wisdom that the river had taught him. After crossing the river, the trail led Elias and his companions into a dense, ancient forest. The air was rich with the scent of damp earth, moss, and pine, and sunlight filtered softly through the canopy, creating shifting patterns of gold and green on the forest floor. Every sound, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the distant call of birds, the faint rustle of unseen animals seemed amplified in the quiet hush of the trees. Celine moved ahead, her eyes scanning the undergrowth. "This is the Forest of Whispers," she said softly. "It teaches vigilance, humility, and the subtle art of listening. The forest speaks not in words, but in patterns, movement, sound, and shadow. Those who ignore its lessons risk losing their way." Elias inhaled deeply, letting the forest settle into him. He observed the soft sway of branches, the tiny insects skimming across the leaves, and the faint shimmer of a hidden stream that wound through the trees. Every detail mattered: the bends of the path, the small markers left by animals, even the quiet shift of light as clouds passed overhead. As they walked, Corvin reminded him, "Patience is as important as courage. You will encounter obstacles, and not all require force. Some are best overcome through awareness and careful timing." Midway through the forest, they came upon a fallen log blocking the path. Elias paused, studying its texture, the moss covering it, and the brittle branches that protruded from its sides. Rather than forcing his way over, he noticed a narrow opening beneath it. With deliberate care, he crouched low, moving through the space without disturbing the surrounding growth. The forest seemed to approve, the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of a bird marking his careful passage. By late afternoon, the trio reached a small clearing where sunlight streamed freely, illuminating wildflowers that swayed gently in the breeze. Elias knelt to examine them, noticing subtle differences in petals and stems, realizing how the smallest details shaped the health of the forest ecosystem. Every observation, every pause, reinforced the lessons of patience, awareness, and attentiveness that had guided him since the monastery. As evening fell, the forest softened into shadows, and the air cooled. Elias sat by the clearing, the sense of pine and earth grounding him. The whispering wind through the leaves seemed to carry quiet encouragement, a reminder that understanding the world required both observation and harmony. He felt the steady pulse of calm certainty within him. The Forest of Whispers had revealed yet another layer of tea as dawn broke. Elias awoke to a soft, golden light filtering through the dense canopy of the Forest of Whispers. The air was cool and moist, filled with the faint scent of wildflowers and pine needles. Birds chirped in gentle, irregular rhythms, and the distant rush of a hidden stream added a soft undertone to the quiet symphony of the forest. Celine led the way, moving with practiced grace, her eyes alert for subtle signs in the undergrowth. "There is a glade ahead," she whispered. "It is hidden, a place that few discover without patience and awareness. Such places teach the value of observation, the reward of stillness, and the quiet joy of understanding what is unseen by most." Elias followed, stepping lightly over mossy roots and stones. Every movement was deliberate, each breath drawn in rhythm with the forest. He noticed the small details, the way sunlight dappled the leaves, the faint flutter of wings as birds moved silently overhead, the delicate patterns of spiderwebs glistening with morning dew. After a careful ascent over a slight ridge, they came upon the hidden glade. Sunlight poured in freely, illuminating a serene pool surrounded by wildflowers, ferns, and ancient oaks. The water was clear and still, reflecting the sky like a perfect mirror. Elias knelt at the edge, cupping the cool liquid in his hands, feeling a sense of calm settle deep within him. This place exists because it has been observed and respected for centuries, Celine said softly. Those who rush through life, blind to its subtle patterns, will never find hidden glades or understand the lessons they hold. Stillness and attention reveal truths that hurry and force cannot. Elias spent hours in quiet reflection, exploring the glade with careful, deliberate steps. He traced the gentle flow of water, observed the insects skimming its surface, and listened to the whispers of the wind through the trees. Each detail offered a lesson. Patience nurtures clarity. Observation reveals hidden meaning, and understanding comes not from haste but from gentle awareness. As the sun began to dip behind the trees, Elias lay on a soft bed of moss, letting the calm energy of the glade seep into him. The air was scented with earth and wildflowers, and the forest around him hummed quietly with life. He understood that leadership, like this hidden place, required subtlety, care, and attentiveness. Power was not in force or speed, but in the quiet, deliberate understanding of the world and the lives within it. As night fell and stars emerged above the canopy, Elias closed his eyes, feeling the glade's serenity wrap around him like a soft cloak. Each lesson from the monastery, the valley, the river, and now this hidden forest had prepared him for what lay ahead, the path toward his destiny, guided by patience, awareness, and gentle, steady strength. The morning light filtered gently through the canopy, painting the forest floor with soft, golden patches. Elias rose slowly, the cool, fragrant air carrying the subtle scent of damp earth and pine. The hidden glade behind them seemed to sigh in quiet farewell as they prepared to continue westward, stepping lightly along the winding forest trail. Celine moved ahead, her gaze sweeping the trees. The forest never truly sleeps, she said softly. Every movement, every sound carries meaning. We must remain observant, patient, and aware. Even small creatures, if watched carefully, teach lessons about vigilance and timing. As they walked, a sudden shadow flitted across the branches above them, a large owl, its feathers mottled in browns and grays, eyes wide and sharp, watching intently. Elias paused, observing it with quiet attention. The bird remained still, tilting its head to follow their movements, yet it did not flee. Its gaze was steady, calm, and unjudging. The watchful owl, Corvin whispered, appears when observation and patience are needed. It reminds us that attention is more powerful than haste, and insight comes to those who do not rush. Elias sat quietly beneath a tree, feeling the forest's rhythm, letting the presence of the owl guide his thoughts. He observed the way the creature's eyes tracked movement, how its head swiveled with precise awareness, and how it seemed to sense even the smallest shift in the forest around it. The owl's calm vigilance mirrored the qualities he had been cultivating within himself: patience, awareness, and careful attention. Hours passed in stillness. Elias noticed the subtle sounds of life in the forest, the rustle of leaves as a squirrel scurried, the soft trickle of a hidden stream, the gentle hum of insects weaving through sunlit clearings. Each sound carried meaning, each movement revealed a pattern, and with the owl's silent presence, he felt a profound connection to the rhythm of life around him. By late afternoon, the owl flew silently from its perch, disappearing into the shadowed trees. Elias rose, carrying with him the calm vigilance it had imparted. Every step forward in the forest was deliberate, steady, and measured. guided by the quiet lessons of observation and patience. As evening fell, Elias and his companions made camp beside a cluster of oaks. The air, cool and scented with pine, he lay beneath the stars, the soft rustle of leaves above blending with the distant call of night creatures. The watchful owl's lesson had settled deep within him. Leadership, like observation, requires presence, patience, and a calm, steady eye on the world around you. The next morning, mist hung low among the trees as Elias and his companions entered a narrow glen that curved like a hidden passage between the hills. The air was damp and cool, carrying the earthy scent of moss, wet leaves, and distant soil. Shadows stretched long across the forest floor, and the faint light filtering through the canopy gave the glen a quiet, almost secretive glow. Selena's voice was soft, careful. This is the shadowed glen. It tests awareness and discernment. Not all dangers announce themselves. Some hide in plain sight, others linger in subtle shifts of light and sound. Observe, and you will pass safely. Elias moved slowly, each footfall deliberate, feeling the damp earth beneath his boots and listening carefully to every sound around him. The faint trickle of a hidden stream, the rustle of leaves as a small animal scurried, the distant creak of a branch swaying in the wind. Every movement was an instruction, a subtle guide that urged patience and careful attention. Midway through the glen, a sudden rustling caught his ear. He froze, scanning the shadows. A fox, its fur glinting reddish-brown in a stray beam of sunlight, darted from the underbrush and disappeared again, leaving only the faint echo of movement. Elias exhaled softly, understanding that vigilance did not mean fear, it meant noticing, waiting, and responding thoughtfully to what appeared. The trail narrowed further, lined with thick brambles and gnarled roots. Elias crouched, moving carefully, hands brushing lightly over the mossy bark for balance. Corvin's quiet guidance reminded him that not every obstacle required force. Some needed patience, observation, and the steady rhythm of careful movement. By midday, the glen opened onto a small, sunlit clearing. Wildflowers nodded gently in the breeze, and a crystal stream wound through, reflecting fragments of sunlight like scattered stars. Elias knelt by the water, letting the cool flow run over his hands and calming his senses. Every obstacle, every subtle shift in the glen had been a lesson in awareness, patience, and the quiet, steady strength required to navigate unseen challenges. As night fell, the glen softened into shadows, and the forest seemed to hum with life. Elias lay on a bed of moss beneath the whispering canopy, feeling the rhythm of the land pulse gently beneath him. The shadowed glen had taught him that true vigilance was not only seeing danger, but understanding the subtle patterns around it, moving through life with both awareness and calm assurance. The next morning, the forest opened to reveal a narrow path leading downhill, the faint sound of flowing water echoing ahead. Elias inhaled deeply, the air cool and fragrant with the scent of wet earth and wildflowers. The sun filtered softly through the treetops, casting shifting patches of light across the path and glinting off the distant stream that wound like a silver ribbon through the valley below. Selene slowed, gesturing toward the sparkling water. "That is the silver stream," she said quietly. "It is said that those who listen carefully to its flow can learn lessons not only of movement, but of patience, timing, and the delicate balance of all things." Elias approached the bank, kneeling to trace the clear water with his hands. The stream bubbled and rippled over smooth stones, its gentle sound calming yet insistent, carrying the subtle rhythm of life itself. He noticed how the current shifted around obstacles, how small eddies formed and dissolved, and how every ripple had its place in the greater flow. Corvin's voice was soft beside him. The stream teaches that even the strongest force can yield without losing its purpose. Leadership is not always about resistance or confrontation. Sometimes it is about understanding the path and moving in harmony with it. Elias carefully stepped into the shallow water, feeling the cool flow swirl around his ankles. He adjusted his pace to match the rhythm of the current, letting the stream guide him across the smooth stones. Each step was deliberate, his senses alert to subtle shifts in depth and flow. The water carried lessons in patience and adaptability, when to step lightly, when to pause, and when to trust the natural course of things. By midday, he reached the opposite bank and knelt once more, letting the water slip through his fingers. The sun glinted on the surface like scattered silver, and the gentle hum of the flowing stream seemed to echo the lessons of every path he had traveled, from the monastery and hidden valleys to rivers, forests, and shadowed glens. Every step, every pause, every observation had been a preparation for understanding this world and the role he would one day play within it. As evening fell, Elias rested by the stream, listening to its soft murmur and feeling a quiet steadiness settle deep within him. The silver stream had shown him the delicate balance between patience and action, observation and movement, calm and decisiveness. He understood now that the journey ahead would require all these qualities, and he felt ready to continue, guided by awareness, presence, and the steady rhythm of the world around him. The next day, Elias and his companions left the silver stream behind, following a winding path that led upward toward open meadows bathed in the soft gold of morning sunlight. The air was fresh and sweet with the scent of blooming wildflowers, and a gentle breeze carried the distant hum of insects and the flutter of birds' wings. The forest gave way to open grass, where dew-laden petals shimmered like tiny jewels under the sun's first rays. Celine walked ahead, her eyes scanning the horizon. "This is the meadow of morning light," she said softly. "It teaches clarity and perspective. Here, the world opens before you, and you learn to see both the details and the broader patterns, the interplay of small actions within a vast whole." Elias stepped carefully through the tall grass, feeling the dew cool against his ankles. He observed the sway of each blade in the breeze, the delicate dance of butterflies hovering above clusters of wildflowers, and the subtle movements of small creatures hidden among the greenery. Everything seemed alive with quiet purpose, each part connected to the others in a gentle, rhythmic harmony. Corvin smiled faintly. The meadow also teaches patience. The sun rises slowly, the flowers open slowly, and every movement of the meadow has its timing. A leader must learn to move in harmony with the pace of the world around them, not against it. Elias walked to the crest of a gentle hill, where the meadow stretched far into the distance. The sunlight painted the grasses in shades of gold and green, and the sky above was a calm, endless blue. He could see the valleys below, the river glinting like a silver ribbon, and the distant hills waiting to guide them onward. The view filled him with a quiet sense of wonder and responsibility, reminding him that every careful step he had taken so far was part of a larger journey. By late afternoon, they reached a shaded grove within the meadow, where a gentle breeze stirred the leaves and tall grasses whispered softly. Elias sat on a smooth stone, letting the warmth of the sunlight and the gentle hum of life around him settle into his mind and body. He reflected on the lessons of the silver stream, the shadowed glen, and the forest of whispers, lessons of patience, observation, and harmony with the world. As evening descended, the meadow softened into gentle shadows, and the air cooled. Elias lay upon the soft grass, listening to the subtle sounds of the meadow, the distant call of a bird, the rustle of a small animal through the undergrowth, the whisper of the wind over the grasses. He felt the growing strength of calm certainty within himself, readying him for the challenges yet to come on the path westward. The morning sun rose slowly over the meadow of morning light, scattering golden hues across the tall grasses and wildflowers. Elias felt the warmth on his skin and the soft rustle of the meadow under his feet as they followed the trail toward a lone, gentle hill in the distance. Its slope was dotted with smooth stones and wild blooms, bathed in sunlight, yet shaded in places by clusters of young oaks and birches. Celine walked ahead, her steps deliberate. "This is the Hill of Reflections," she said softly. "It is a place to pause and consider, to look within as well as without. The lessons here are quiet but deep. A leader must understand themselves before they can guide others." Elias climbed slowly, each step mindful. The soft earth beneath him seemed to hum with life, the wind carrying faint whispers through the grasses. As he reached the hilltop, he found a natural vantage point, a shallow, mirror-like pool of water, smooth and still, reflecting the sky above. The reflection was perfect, yet subtly different from the world around it, revealing the shifting clouds, the gentle sway of the grass, and the intricate details of a world often overlooked. Corvin approached, standing beside him. "Look carefully," he said. "Not all reflection is in water. Every challenge, every success, every hesitation is a mirror. Observe yourself as you would the world, honestly and without judgment. Only then can true understanding grow." Elias knelt beside the pool, studying the mirrored surface. He noticed the ripples caused by the faintest breeze, the soft reflection of a bird passing overhead, and the interplay of light and shadow across the surrounding hills. Slowly, he closed his eyes, letting his mind wander inward, considering his journey so far, the lessons of the monastery, the patience of the Valley of Echoes, the guidance of rivers and forests, and the vigilance he had cultivated through trials both small and subtle. Hours passed in quiet contemplation. The wind shifted gently, brushing the hilltop with soft whispers, carrying the distant hum of insects and birds. Elias felt a calm awareness settle deep within him, a balance of self-knowledge, observation, and patience. He understood that leadership was not only about guiding others, but also about knowing oneself, maintaining clarity, and acting with quiet purpose. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Elias lay beside the mirrored pool, the colors of the sky reflected in the still water. The Hill of Reflections had given him the gift of quiet insight, a steady understanding that would guide him through the challenges yet to come. He felt a sense of readiness, calm and deliberate, for whatever lay on the western path ahead. The next morning, Elias and his companions left the Hill of Reflections behind, following a narrow path that led upward toward a series of rolling ridges. The air was crisp and fragrant, carrying faint hints of pine, earth, and wildflowers. As they ascended, a soft wind began to stir, brushing over the hills and threading through the grass in gentle, melodic whispers. Celine paused and tilted her head, listening. "These are the whispering winds," she said softly. "They carry stories, warnings, and guidance. Listen carefully, they will teach you patience, discernment, and the subtle power of perception." Elias stopped, closing his eyes for a moment, letting the wind move around him. The whispers were almost imperceptible at first, faint rustle, a barely audible hum, but as he tuned his senses, the messages became clear in their rhythm. Each shift of air, each soft note carried meaning, the gentle sway of the grass, the way a distant tree bent slightly under the current, even the subtle movement of a bird adjusting its flight. Corvin smiled faintly. "The winds show you what is not obvious. They teach the importance of observation and timing. Leadership requires awareness of what lies beneath the surface, not just what is immediately visible." As they walked along the ridge, Elias paid careful attention to the subtleties around him. The wind guided his pace, nudged his attention to hidden paths, and revealed safe steps where the terrain was uneven or treacherous. The grasses bent under the breeze, shadows shifted with the sun, and every detail spoke to him of balance, caution, and gentle adaptability. By midday, they reached a high plateau where the winds blew freely, carrying distant scents of pine, earth, and a faint sweetness of distant flowers. Elias sat on a smooth rock, letting the soft gusts wash over him, feeling the rhythm of the air align with his own steady heartbeat. The whispering winds had reminded him that vigilance was not tension but awareness, and that even in uncertainty, careful observation could reveal the safest path forward. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Elias lay back on the grass, listening to the gentle sighs of the wind and the faint hum of life across the rolling ridges. He understood that the path west was not just a physical journey, it was a practice in patience, observation, and harmony with the subtle forces of the world. The whispering winds carried these lessons gently, and Elias felt the calm certainty of a boy, a monk, and a prince steadily becoming one. The morning sun rose softly over the ridges, spilling golden light across the rolling hills. Elias and his companions descended toward a small, secluded grove where sunlight filtered through dense leaves, creating patches of glimmering light on the forest floor. The air was cool and fragrant, with the scent of damp earth, pine, and faint blossoms, and every breath seemed to carry the quiet energy of the grove. Celine led the way, her steps light and deliberate. "This is the Glimmering Grove," she said softly. "It teaches the value of focus, patience, and noticing the small details that others might overlook. What seems ordinary can hold great lessons if you watch carefully." Elias stepped lightly over roots and moss, his eyes following the soft play of light across the undergrowth. He noticed the delicate patterns of lichen on tree bark, the subtle shimmer of a spiderweb, and the gentle flutter of butterflies above wildflowers. Every detail seemed imbued with quiet purpose, as if the grove itself was a teacher, offering its lessons to those willing to notice. Corvin walked beside him, pointing to a small stream that wound through the grove. "Even here, every element has its place," he said. "The stream, the stones, the plants, they exist in harmony. Leadership, like this grove, requires understanding how the smallest parts contribute to the whole." Elias knelt beside the water, tracing its flow with his fingers and observing the tiny creatures skimming along its surface. The stream reflected the dappled sunlight, creating patterns that shifted subtly as the water moved. He realized that patience and attention allowed him to see these patterns, revealing truths that might otherwise go unnoticed. By late afternoon, they found a shaded clearing where wildflowers swayed gently in the breeze, their colors muted and soft in the slanting sunlight. Elias sat on a smooth stone, feeling the calm energy of the grove settle into him. The lessons of observation, focus, and patience that he had learned in the monastery, the valley, the forests, and the hills now flowed together here, strengthening his sense of quiet confidence and steady purpose. As night fell, the grove was bathed in a soft, silvery light from the rising moon. Elias lay beneath the branches, listening to the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of night creatures. The glimmering grove had offered him a profound reminder that true leadership required careful attention, patient observation, and the understanding that even the smallest details can shape the path forward. As the morning light stretched across the glimmering grove, Elias and his companions moved steadily westward, following a winding trail that led upward toward a gentle rise. The air was crisp and fragrant, carrying the subtle scents of pine, moss, and distant flowers. Sunlight dappled the forest floor, shifting with the soft sway of branches overhead. Celine paused near a narrow opening in the trees. "Ahead lies the twilight clearing," she said quietly. "It teaches balance, the harmony between light and shadow, action and reflection, strength and patience. A leader must learn to walk between contrasts without losing equilibrium." Elias stepped cautiously into the clearing, feeling the soft grass underfoot. Sunlight streamed through the treetops, mingling with long shadows cast by the surrounding oaks and pines. The interplay of light and dark was mesmerizing, subtle yet powerful, and he sensed a quiet energy in the space, as though the clearing itself held lessons for those willing to observe. Corvin followed, smiling faintly. "Notice how the light shifts," he said softly, "how shadows move across the ground. Even small changes can teach you more than forceful actions ever could. Leadership is not always loud or immediate. It is often about patience and subtle guidance." Elias walked slowly through the clearing, his eyes attentive to the smallest details: the gentle sway of flowers in the breeze, the glint of sunlight on dew-laden leaves, and the distant rustle of hidden creatures. Each observation reminded him of the delicate balance of the world around him and the quiet steadiness required to move within it. As evening approached, the light softened into gentle gold and muted violet, shadows lengthening across the clearing. Elias settled on a patch of soft grass, letting the calm of the space sink into him. He reflected on the lessons of the whispering winds and the glimmering grove, understanding that balance was not passive. It required awareness, presence, and the patience to respond thoughtfully to the rhythms of the world. Under the twilight sky, Elias lay with the soft hum of the forest around him. The clearing whispered its lessons in the subtle play of light and shadow, teaching him that leadership, like the world itself, required harmony and steady attentiveness. He felt a growing calm certainty within him, ready to carry these lessons as he continued westward toward the unknown path that awaited him. At dawn, Elias awoke to the gentle murmur of water nearby. Following the sound, he and his companions descended toward a small brook that wound through the forest like a silver ribbon. The water sparkled in the morning light, glinting across smooth stones, and carried a delicate, melodic murmur that seemed to echo softly through the trees. Celine knelt at the edge, letting her fingers brush the cool surface. "This is the singing brook," she whispered. "It teaches rhythm, patience, and subtle guidance. Listen carefully, and it will reveal the patterns of the world around you." Elias crouched beside the brook, letting the cool water run through his hands. He noticed the way it curved around stones, forming tiny eddies and whirlpools. Each ripple and splash seemed purposeful, flowing in harmony with the brook's natural path. He realized the brook moved with gentle determination, never rushing, yet persistent in shaping its course through obstacles. Corvin gestured toward the narrow stepping stones that crossed the brook. "Even in movement, there is rhythm," he said. "A leader must learn to follow the natural flow, adjusting without resistance. Patience is as important as action." Elias began to cross, placing each foot carefully on the stones, letting the gentle current guide his balance. He moved slowly, deliberately, aware of each subtle shift beneath his weight and each ripple that brushed against his boots. The brook's song seemed to harmonize with his heartbeat, teaching him the quiet interplay between observation and action, patience and decisiveness. By midday, he reached the opposite bank, pausing to observe the brook's flow. The sun glinted on the surface, reflecting a myriad of tiny lights like scattered stars. Elias felt a profound calm settle within him, as though the brook had imparted a quiet lesson in steady, purposeful progression through life's challenges. As evening approached, he rested on a smooth rock near the brook, listening to its continuous song and watching the forest's shadows lengthen. The singing brook had reminded him that leadership required not force alone, but harmony with the currents of life, awareness, patience, and the gentle understanding that even the smallest actions ripple outward, shaping the path ahead. By the time Elias and his companions left the singing brook, the sun had risen high, casting long, shifting shadows through the forest. Their path led into a narrow hollow, tucked between steep hills and thick groves of ancient trees. A light fog clung to the ground, softening the contours of the earth and lending the hollow a quiet, mysterious aura. Celine moved forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is the Veiled Hollow," she said. "It teaches caution, discernment, and the patience to see through uncertainty. Not everything is as it appears. The hollow will test your perception and your ability to act with clarity." Elias stepped carefully along the path, feeling the damp earth beneath his boots. The fog shifted with each breeze, concealing roots, rocks, and occasional shallow dips in the trail. He slowed his pace, listening to the subtle sounds around him, the drip of water from leaves, the distant rustle of small animals, the whisper of wind against moss-covered trunks. Corvin pointed to faint shapes in the fog, shadows that seemed to shift as he looked. "Do not judge too quickly," he advised. "Perception can deceive. Patience and careful observation reveal what is real and what is merely shadow." Elias continued, letting his senses extend beyond sight. He noted the way the fog diffused the sunlight, the subtle movement of branches, and the almost imperceptible shifts in the ground beneath him. Each detail guided him, allowing him to navigate the hollow safely while remaining aware of the subtle lessons it offered. By late afternoon, the fog began to lift, revealing a small clearing within the hollow. Sunlight filtered softly through the trees, highlighting ferns and wildflowers along the edges. Elias knelt beside a shallow pool of water that reflected the clearing, studying the ripples and noting the delicate patterns created by falling leaves. The hollow had shown him that clarity often comes after patience. That understanding emerges when one moves deliberately and observes carefully. As evening descended, Elias lay on a soft patch of moss near the pool, listening to the forest settle into quiet night rhythms. The Veiled Hollow had taught him the value of discernment, careful attention, and calm action in the face of uncertainty. He felt a deepening sense of inner steadiness, ready to carry these lessons further along the western path that awaited him. The following morning, Elias awoke to a soft golden light filtering through the trees. The forest opened slightly as they approached a narrow trail lined with tall, slender, lantern-like flowers whose petals glimmered faintly in the dawn. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying hints of wildflowers, damp earth, and a distant, hidden stream. Celine walked ahead, her hand brushing gently against the glowing petals. "This is the lantern path," she said softly. "It teaches guidance, subtle illumination, and the importance of finding your way even when the world seems dim. A leader must learn to be both careful and clear, guiding themselves and others with quiet confidence." Elias stepped slowly, feeling the soft soil beneath his boots. The flowers seemed to sway slightly as he passed, their faint glow creating shifting patterns on the ground. Every detail mattered. The angle of sunlight catching on petals, the subtle rustle of leaves in the breeze, and the distant hum of hidden insects weaving through the air. Corvin walked beside him, pointing to the gentle curves of the trail. "Notice how the path winds," he said. "Not every route is direct. Sometimes the safest and most meaningful way forward requires careful observation and patient steps." Elias followed, moving deliberately between the glowing flowers. The petals reflected softly in his eyes, casting a gentle illumination on the path ahead. He paused often, listening to the forest, observing shadows and light, and allowing the quiet energy of the lantern path to guide his pace and decisions. Each step became an exercise in calm awareness, each breath a reminder to move with thoughtfulness and care. By midday, the trail opened into a sunlit grove, the glow of the flowers fading into the warmth of daylight. Elias knelt beside a small stream running through the grove, letting the water run over his hands and reflecting on the lessons of patience, observation, and guidance he had gathered from the forest, the hollow, and the singing brook. As evening fell, Elias lay beneath the gentle canopy of the grove, the soft whispers of the wind through the leaves blending with the distant murmur of water. The lantern path had reminded him that clarity and guidance come from quiet observation and deliberate action. Leadership, he realized, was not about haste or force, but about steady, thoughtful, presence, shining light where it is needed, even when the world seems dim. As night fell over the lantern path, Elias and his companions followed a gently descending trail that led to a hidden glen, open to the sky above. The first stars began to appear, twinkling softly against the deepening indigo, their reflections mirrored faintly in a small, clear pool at the center of the glen. The air was cool, scented faintly with pine, moss, and the lingering fragrance of the glowing lantern flowers they had passed. Celine paused at the edge of the glen, letting her gaze sweep across the starlit sky. "This is the starlit glen," she said softly. "It teaches perspective, reflection, and the quiet guidance that comes from looking beyond yourself. Just as the stars shine steadily in the vast night, a leader must learn to hold their course calmly, even when the path seems dark." Elias stepped lightly onto the soft moss, feeling the cool night air brush his face. He looked up at the stars, tracing faint constellations with his eyes, and felt a sense of quiet awe. The vastness of the sky reminded him of the journey ahead and the responsibilities that awaited him. Yet it also brought a calm clarity, the reminder that patience, awareness, and careful observation were his true guides. Corvin settled beside him, nodding toward the sky. "See how steady they are," he said. "No matter how far the wind blows or clouds drift, the stars remain. Learn from their constancy." Leadership, like the stars, requires calm, steady guidance and the ability to illuminate the way without haste or force. Elias knelt by the pool at the center of the glen, watching the water reflect the night sky. The ripples from a gentle breeze made the stars dance in soft patterns, reminding him that even amidst change and uncertainty, balance and presence create harmony. He traced the patterns with his fingers, feeling a deepening sense of connection to the world around him and the lessons he had gathered from valleys, rivers, forests, and hills. As the night deepened, Elias lay on the soft moss, the cool air brushing against him, the whispers of the forest blending with the faint murmur of the pool. The starlit glen had taught him that guidance comes not from force, but from clarity, patience, and quiet presence. He felt the steady growth of calm certainty within him as strength that would carry him forward, illuminating the path even in the darkest moments of his journey west. The first light of dawn brushed gently across the starlit glen, painting the moss and trees in soft golds and pale greens. Elias rose, stretching carefully, feeling the cool morning air brush against his skin and carry the faint sense of pine, earth, and douladon grass. Ahead, the trail began to climb steadily toward a crescent-shaped hill, its slope dotted with low shrubs and clusters of wildflowers glinting with morning dew. Celine led the way, her steps calm and deliberate. "This is the Crescent Hill," she said softly. "It teaches perspective, foresight, and the ability to see both the path behind you and the road ahead. A leader must understand the weight of choices, past actions, and future possibilities all at once. Elias began the slow ascent, noticing the gentle sway of grasses and the subtle shimmer of dew on petals. Each step was deliberate, his senses alert to the subtle changes in the terrain beneath his boots. He paused often, observing how shadows shifted with the climbing sun, how the wind rustled the leaves, and how the birds moved silently between branches. Every detail seemed to carry meaning, reinforcing the lessons he had been gathering on patience, awareness, and balance. Corvin walked beside him, pointing to the curve of the hill. "See how the land bends," he said. "The slope allows you to observe what lies ahead and what has been left behind. Leadership, like this hill, requires an understanding of both the journey traveled and the path still to come." Elias reached the crest, the crescent shape allowing him a broad view of the valleys below, the rivers glinting like silver threads, and the distant ridges rising steadily toward the horizon. He knelt on a smooth stone, letting the wind brush against his face and listening to the soft symphony of nature, the rustle of leaves, the gentle hum of insects, and the distant call of birds. As the sun climbed higher, the shadows shortened, and the world below became clearer. Elias felt the weight of his journey and the steady growth of his understanding. The crescent hill had taught him foresight, perspective, and the quiet wisdom of observing both the past and the possibilities of the future. As evening approached, he lay on the soft grass near the crest, watching the sunset spill gold and rose across the distant valleys. The lesson of the crescent hill settled deep within him. True leadership requires reflection, foresight, and steady, patient awareness, even when the path ahead is uncertain. The following morning, a gentle fog rolled through the hills, blanketing the crescent hill and spilling into the valleys below. Elias inhaled deeply, the cool, damp air carrying the earthy scent of moss, wet soil, and distant wildflowers. The mist softened the world, turning trees and rocks into muted silhouettes and lending the landscape an otherworldly stillness. Celine moved carefully ahead, her steps measured and quiet. "This is the Misted Valley," she said softly. "It teaches patience, trust, and the understanding that clarity often comes after stillness. In life, as in this valley, what is hidden may be revealed if you move deliberately and observe carefully." Elias descended slowly into the valley, each step deliberate on the soft, damp earth. The fog swirled gently around him, and the familiar sounds of the forest birds, insects, and distant streams were softened into a muted symphony. Every subtle shift in the mist, every gentle movement in the undergrowth, felt heightened, demanding careful attention and calm awareness. Corvin paused, pointing toward faint shapes in the fog. "Not everything is immediately clear," he said. "Some paths require patience and observation. Leadership is similar. Rushing without awareness can lead to mistakes, but careful, attentive movement brings understanding." Elias nodded, letting the words sink in as he moved deeper into the valley. He noticed the dew clinging to leaves, the soft ripple of a hidden stream, and the gentle sway of mist through the branches. Each observation strengthened his awareness, teaching him that patience allowed him to see what would have otherwise remained hidden. By midday, the fog began to lift slightly, revealing glimpses of the valley floor wildflowers, mossy rocks, and a narrow stream winding like a silver thread. Elias knelt beside the water, letting it run through his fingers, reflecting on the lessons of the Misted Valley, that clarity comes with patience, and that even when the way is unclear, careful attention can reveal the safest and wisest path. As evening fell, the valley softened into muted shadows, and the world seemed hushed and serene. Elias lay on a bed of moss, listening to the quiet rhythm of the valley, the gentle trickle of water, the distant rustle of leaves, and the whisper of the wind through the mist. The misted valley had imparted a vital lesson, that understanding, foresight, and calm action often emerge only after a period of stillness and observation, and that patience is a cornerstone of both leadership and self-mastery. The next morning, the mist of the misted valley had lifted, leaving the forest bathed in soft, warm sunlight. Elias and his companions followed a gently rising trail that led to a hidden glade where rays of light spilled through the branches, creating pools of gold on the forest floor. The air was fragrant with the scents of pine, moss, and blossoming wildflowers, carrying a gentle warmth that felt soothing after the cool fog of the valley. Celine moved forward, her eyes scanning the sunlit space. "This is the sunlit glade," she said softly. "It teaches clarity, hope, and the quiet strength that comes from understanding and presence. A leader must learn to move with confidence, even when challenges have clouded the way." Elias stepped carefully through the glade, feeling the soft grass beneath his boots and noticing how sunlight danced across leaves and petals. Birds flitted among the branches, their songs delicate and harmonious, and small insects traced lazy patterns through the warm air. Each tiny movement felt purposeful, revealing the subtle rhythms of life around him. Corvin followed, nodding toward a narrow stream that sparkled in the sunlight. "Even here, in clarity, patience is needed," he said. "Observe the details, notice the subtle movements, and understand how each part contributes to the whole. Leadership requires both vision and awareness." Elias knelt by the stream, letting the clear, cool water flow over his hands. He watched the way sunlight shimmered on the ripples, the reflections of leaves and sky dancing across the surface. He felt a deep sense of calm settle into him, a quiet reassurance that clarity, hope, and steady awareness could guide him through the most uncertain paths. By late afternoon, he rested on a soft patch of moss, listening to the gentle hum of life in the glade, the rustle of leaves, the faint trickle of water, and the melodic chirping of birds. The sunlit glade had offered him a profound reminder. Even after fog and uncertainty, light and clarity always return. With patience, awareness, and quiet confidence, the path forward becomes visible, guiding him steadily toward the destiny that awaited him. As evening fell, Elias lay beneath the dappled sunlight fading into twilight, feeling the warmth and calm energy of the glade settle within him. The lessons of the misted valley, crescent hill, and sunlit glade intertwined, strengthening his growing certainty and quiet strength for the journey yet to come. The morning sun broke through the canopy as Elias and his companions continued westward, following the gentle murmur of water that led them toward a secluded waterfall hidden deep within the forest. The sound grew steadily, a soft roar like nature's heartbeat, mingling with the fragrance of damp earth, moss, and the faint scent of wildflowers carried on a cool breeze. Celine moved ahead with careful grace. "This is the hidden waterfall," she said softly. "It teaches perseverance, renewal, and the quiet strength that flows from consistent effort. Even the gentlest stream, given time, can carve through stone. A leader must learn that steady determination often shapes the world more than force alone." Elias approached the pool at the waterfall's base, kneeling to feel the cool spray misting the air. Water tumbled over smooth stones, forming a rhythmic cascade that seemed to pulse with life. Each droplet, though small, contributed to the persistent flow, wearing away obstacles over time. Elias watched carefully, noting the interplay of light on the falling water, the subtle patterns created by the current, and the soft echoes bouncing off mossy rocks. Corvin gestured to the rocks and pool. "See how the water moves around obstacles. rather than against them. Leadership requires the same: patience, adaptability, and quiet persistence. Force is not always the answer. Understanding the flow allows you to guide without friction. Elias spent hours observing the waterfall and the stream that continued beyond it. Learning its rhythm, he dipped his hands into the cool pool, feeling the steady pulse of the water and imagining how, with patience and care, even the smallest actions could ripple outward to shape larger outcomes. As evening approached, the golden light of the setting sun illuminated the mist rising from the waterfall, casting rainbows across the glade. Elias lay on a smooth stone, listening to the gentle roar of water and the soft whispers of wind through the trees. The hidden waterfall had taught him that true strength comes not from force, but from steady, patient perseverance and the quiet awareness of how every action, no matter how small, contributes to the shaping of a path. As night approached, Elias and his companions followed a narrow trail that led away from the hidden waterfall, descending gently into a shadowed glen where a small brook wound quietly among moss-covered stones. The fading light cast a gentle glow on the water, creating reflections of the deepening sky and the silhouettes of trees swaying softly in the evening breeze. The air was cool and fragrant with damp earth, and the faint sweet scent of wildflowers drifting from the nearby glade. Celine stepped lightly beside the brook. "This is the Twilight Brook," she said softly. "It teaches calm, reflection, and the quiet guidance that comes from listening rather than rushing. Even as darkness approaches, the path remains if you move with awareness and patience." Elias knelt at the water's edge, letting his fingers trace the smooth stones beneath the shallow stream. The water rippled gently, carrying tiny leaves downstream, and the soft trickle seemed to whisper in rhythm with the evening breeze. He observed carefully the curve of the brook, the reflections in the water, and the delicate interplay of light and shadow along its banks. Corvin crouched beside him. "Notice how the brook flows steadily even as the light fades," he said. "Leadership is often like this: calm, deliberate, and constant, even when the path seems uncertain. Those who hurry or force their way may stumble. Those who move thoughtfully can navigate any shadow." Elias followed the brook upstream for a short distance, stepping carefully on mossy stones and observing the gentle patterns of water around each rock. Each step reinforced a quiet rhythm: patience, awareness, and trust in the flow of life. The brook seemed to mirror his growing understanding of himself and the lessons he had gathered along his journey: observation, balance, perseverance, and calm vigilance. As twilight deepened, Elias sat on a soft patch of moss beside the brook, watching the sky turn deep indigo and listening to the gentle trickle of water. The air was cool, scented with earth and fading blossoms, and the quiet of the glen wrapped around him like a soft cloak. The Twilight Brook had taught him that even as darkness falls, steady awareness, calm reflection, and patient observation illuminates the path forward. Night had fully settled over the forest, and the trail led Elias and his companions into a gentle open space where silver moonlight spilled across the ground like soft silk. The air was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of pine, earth, and the lingering sweetness of evening flowers. Shadows stretched long and soft, dancing subtly as the breeze moved through the trees. Celine stepped ahead, her eyes reflecting the pale glow. "This is the moonlit clearing," she said softly. "It teaches reflection, calm, courage, and quiet strength. Even in darkness, the path can be seen if one moves with awareness and patience." Elias walked slowly through the clearing, letting his senses absorb every detail: the silver light on the soft grass, the delicate shimmer on dew-covered leaves, the distant call of a night bird. Each step was deliberate, each breath slow and steady, grounding him in the present moment and sharpening his awareness of the subtle rhythms around him. Corvin gestured to the soft light illuminating the clearing. "See how the moon reveals what the sun cannot," he said quietly. Leadership is often like this, finding clarity in moments when others may be uncertain, guiding with calm presence and careful observation rather than haste. Elias knelt by a small pond at the edge of the clearing, watching the moon's reflection ripple gently in the water. The silver glow danced across the surface, shifting subtly with the evening breeze. He felt a quiet sense of peace settle within him, understanding that calm, courage, and patient reflection could illuminate the way, even when the world seemed shadowed or uncertain. By midnight, Elias lay on a soft bed of moss, listening to the gentle hum of nocturnal life, the distant rustle of leaves, the soft trickle of water, and the occasional whisper of wind through the trees. The moonlit clearing had offered him a lesson in quiet strength, presence, and awareness, that even in darkness, steady attention and calm reflection could light the path forward and guide both oneself and others safely through the unknown. As dawn began to touch the edges of the forest, Elias and his companions descended into a narrow valley where tall pines rose like silent sentinels. Their long, slender trunks were adorned with glowing fungi that shimmered softly like lanterns in the early morning light, casting a gentle, ethereal glow on the forest floor. The air was crisp and fragrant, filled with pine, damp earth, and the faint sweetness of distant flowers. Celine led the way, her steps light and deliberate. "This is the Valley of Lantern Pines," she said softly. "It teaches guidance, quiet illumination, and the importance of moving with gentle awareness. Even in darkness, there is always light to guide those who watch carefully." Elias walked slowly between the glowing trunks, noticing the subtle variations in light and shadow. Each step seemed to reveal something new: the delicate shimmer of dew on pine needles, the soft rustle of small creatures moving among fallen leaves, and the quiet glow that pulsed from the fungi as though in gentle rhythm with the valley itself. Corvin pointed to the valley floor, where a narrow stream wound its way past moss-covered rocks. "See how the light guides your path," he said. "Leadership is similar. Those who move thoughtfully, aware of subtle guidance and the needs of others, can navigate even the most shadowed valleys." Elias knelt beside the stream, letting the cool water flow through his hands. The soft glow of the fungi reflected on the rippling surface, creating tiny patterns of light that danced gently across the rocks. He felt a growing calm settle within him, a quiet understanding that true guidance comes not from force or urgency, but from patience, observation, and the careful illumination of what lies ahead. As evening approached, Elias rested beneath a tall pine, listening to the whisper of wind through the branches and the faint hum of nocturnal life stirring in the valley. The Valley of Lantern Pines had reminded him that even when paths seemed shadowed, gentle guidance, awareness, and steady presence illuminate the way. Leadership, like the softly glowing valley, comes from patience, care, and the quiet ability to help others find their path. Morning broke over the Valley of Lantern Pines, casting pale light across the softly glowing trunks. Elias and his companions followed a winding path that led to a secluded glade, where the leaves of the trees shimmered like silver in the early sunlight. The air was crisp and fragrant, carrying faint hints of pine, moss, and the distant scent of blossoms carried on a gentle breeze. Celine moved ahead with quiet grace. "This is the Glade of Silver Leaves," she said softly. "It teaches reflection, balance, and the subtle power of noticing what others might overlook. Even the smallest detail can hold a lesson if you watch closely and patiently." Elias stepped lightly onto the soft, moss-covered ground, noticing how the silver leaves glinted and shifted as the wind brushed against them. Each subtle movement revealed a gentle rhythm, a hidden pattern of life within the glade. Birds flitted between branches, insects traced delicate arcs through the air, and the faint rustle of small animals added a quiet, constant melody to the glade's serenity. Corvin followed, nodding toward a small stream running through the glade. "Even here, balance is key," he said. "Observe the way water flows around obstacles, the way light shifts across the leaves. Leadership, like the glade, requires attention, patience, and the ability to understand the harmony between all the parts of the whole." Elias knelt beside the stream, letting the cool water slip through his hands and watching the silver leaves reflected on its surface. He felt a deep sense of calm settle within him, understanding that every lesson of patience, observation, and awareness he had learned from valleys, hills, forests, and streams came together here. The subtle shimmer of the silver leaves mirrored the quiet clarity he was cultivating within himself. By late afternoon, he rested on a soft patch of moss, listening to the gentle whisper of wind through the branches, the distant trickle of the stream, and the hum of life in the glade. The glade of silver leaves had shown him the power of careful observation, the beauty of balance, and the quiet strength that comes from noticing the smallest details in the world around him. He felt the steady growth of calm certainty, readying him for the challenges and revelations still to come. The sun rose slowly over the glade of silver leaves, scattering pale light across the mossy ground. Elias and his companions followed a winding trail that led into a narrow hollow surrounded by towering pines whose trunks rose straight and tall into the sky. The air was cool and fragrant with pine resin and damp earth, and every footstep seemed to carry a faint resonant echo among the trees. Celine walked ahead, her gaze scanning the hollow. "This is the hollow of echoing pines," she said softly. "It teaches the power of reflection, patience, and listening carefully. Every sound carries meaning here, just as every action has consequence. A leader must learn to hear what is not immediately spoken and respond with calm understanding." Elias stepped lightly among the roots and fallen needles, letting his ears attune to the subtle sounds around him, the whisper of the wind through the needles, the soft footfalls of small animals, the faint creak of branches swaying above. Each sound seemed to resonate with the lessons he had learned along the journey: observation, patience, balance, and steady awareness. Corvin gestured toward the hollow, the tall pines standing as silent guardians. "Notice how sound travels here," he said. "A single action or word can carry far beyond its source. Leadership requires understanding how influence moves, how small decisions ripple outward, and how careful attention shapes outcomes." Elias knelt beside a shallow pool where the pine's reflections shimmered, watching the ripples formed by falling needles. The echoes around him seemed to amplify the quiet rhythm of the forest, the gentle sway of branches, the soft murmur of wind, the distant calls of birds. Each echo was a reminder that all actions, no matter how small, carry weight and meaning. As evening fell, the hollow was bathed in the soft glow of twilight. Elias lay on a bed of moss, listening to the faint echo of distant water and the whisper of wind through the pines. The hollow of echoing pines had taught him that true awareness requires careful listening, that patience allows understanding, and that leadership is shaped not only by action but by the thoughtful consideration of how every choice resonates. Night had fallen as Elias and his companions climbed a gentle ridge beyond the hollow of echoing pines. The sky above was clear, revealing a vast tapestry of stars that glittered silently in the deep indigo. The air was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of pine, earth, and night-blooming flowers. A soft breeze whispered over the hill, rustling the grass and creating a quiet symphony that harmonized with the sparkling heavens. Celine walked ahead, her steps slow and deliberate. "This is the hill of silent stars," she said softly. "It teaches patience, reflection, and the quiet strength that comes from stillness. Here, in the presence of the vast sky, you learn humility, awareness, and the importance of steady guidance." Elias climbed slowly, feeling the soft grass beneath his boots and letting the calm of the night settle over him. He paused often, gazing upward at the endless stars, tracing constellations with his eyes and listening to the faint rustle of the breeze. Each detail, the shimmer of starlight, the subtle movement of the grass, the quiet calls of distant night creatures, felt alive with meaning and insight. Corvin stepped beside him, nodding toward the sky. "See how the stars hold their place, steady and constant," he said. "A leader must be similarly steadfast. Even when the world shifts and shadows fall, calm presence and careful thought illuminate the path." Elias found a smooth stone near the hilltop and sat, feeling the cool night air on his face and listening to the soft rhythm of the world around him. He reflected on the lessons of valleys, glades, streams, and forested patient observation, steady perseverance, quiet guidance, and awareness that had carried him this far. Here, under the silent stars, he understood the importance of integrating these lessons, holding them close as he prepared for the path ahead. As he lay back on the soft grass, gazing at the vast night sky, Elias felt a profound calm settle within him. The hill of silent stars had taught him that patience, reflection, and quiet courage are the pillars of strength. With these lessons, he was ready to step fully into the destiny that awaited him, carrying the wisdom of his journey into the final chapter of his path. At first light, Elias rose from the hill of silent stars and began the final climb toward a distant summit that crowned the western horizon. The air was crisp and pure, tinged with the scent of pine, earth, and the faint sweetness of morning blooms. Below him, valleys, glades, streams, and forests stretched like a quilt of memories, each holding the lessons of his journey: patience, observation, balance, perseverance, and quiet courage. Celine walked beside him, her voice gentle. "This is the crowned summit," she said softly. "It is where all lessons meet. Here you will see how far you have come and understand the path ahead. A leader is not made in a single moment, but in the steady accumulation of awareness, care, and courage." Elias climbed steadily, every step deliberate. The ground beneath his boots was uneven, littered with stones and roots, yet he moved with a calm confidence, guided by the wisdom he had gathered along rivers, hills, valleys, and glades. Corvin followed silently, offering no words, only the steady presence of a mentor who trusted in Ilias's growth. As he reached the summit, the world unfolded below him in breathtaking clarity. The valleys stretched endlessly, streams glinted like silver threads in the sunlight, and forests waved gently in the breeze. The sky above was wide and infinite, the clouds painted with the soft colors of dawn. Elias knelt for a moment, letting the sheer vastness of the world fill him with awe and quiet resolve. Then, in the center of the summit, he saw it, an ancient stone pedestal, simple yet commanding. Upon it rested a circlet of gold, delicate but radiant, engraved with symbols of his kingdom. Elias understood, with steady certainty, that this was the emblem of the prince he had been born to be. His journey had not only trained his body and mind, but had strengthened his heart, filling it with patience, awareness, and quiet courage, the qualities of a true leader. He placed the circlet upon his head, feeling its weight and its promise. The wind whispered through the summit, carrying the lessons of every stream, hill, forest, and glade across the valleys below, Elias felt a deep, unwavering calm settle into him. He was ready not because he had been given a crown, but because he had earned it through steady, mindful growth and the understanding of his place in the world. As he gazed across the horizon, the morning sun bathed the land in golden light. Elias, once a boy raised by monks, now stood as a prince, prepared to guide his people with patience, wisdom, and gentle strength. Thank you for joining Elias on his journey. As the sun rises over his kingdom, let the calm, steady rhythm of his path settle in your mind and body. Take a deep breath. Feel the peace of the forests, streams, hills, and glades carrying you gently toward rest. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment. Share your favorite part of the journey or where you are watching from, whether it's the US, Europe, Canada, or somewhere else in the world. Let this story guide you toward a restful, serene night, carrying the quiet courage and patience of Elias with you. Good night, and may your dreams be calm, vivid, and full of gentle wonder.